Chapter 17:14. This gate was extremely demonic and mysterious, shining with a strange light, like a gate from hell. No one dared to enter it casually, nobody knew what was inside. The people standing outside the gate exchanged glances as their hearts pounded madly, unable to calm down. "Should we enter?" someone asked. "Do we need to report this to the Realm Lord?" a person at the side replied. They had no idea what they would encounter if they entered. Hence, everyone was incomparably cautious. "Let's go in and take a look first." The person at the side seemed very young. His eyes were sharp and he exuded a tyrannical aura. His silhouette flashed as he directly appeared in front of the gate. After that, he took a step forward and entered. The others followed after him, and in an instant, their silhouettes vanished from this space. When they appeared in another space, everything changed. The sky here was dark and there was a sun hanging high up in the sky. However, this sun didn't exude the intent of a blazing sun. It was a black sun. The sun was dark and gloomy, enveloping the earth, causing the entire world to be filled with a gloomy aura. Although their cultivation bases were extremely high, surpassing the immortal Emperor realm, they couldn't help but feel a sense of pressure in their hearts when they saw the black sun. There was also loneliness and desolation. Next to the sun in the sky, there were 9 black spheres that looked like dark stars. They revolved around the sun that was emitting a dark light. These star-like spheres exuded a gloomy and cold intent, causing them to shiver uncontrollably. Even with their powerful cultivation bases, they actually felt somewhat cold. "Dusk of the Gods, ancient battlefield." A person spoke in a low voice. He didn't expect the legends to be true. There really was an ancient battlefield in the azure mystic immortal realms, the Dusk of the Gods. "Where's the exit?" At this moment, someone turned his head as his countenance instantly turned pale. He discovered that the gate had vanished. After they entered, there was no exit. "Let's inform the Realm Lord." A person spoke. He took out his messaging crystal. Since they found this legendary place, there wouldn't be any lack of good fortune in this place. They didn't need to worry that others would be too strong. Right now, they were more worried about their safety. No one knew what they would encounter in this world. After exchanging glances, their silhouettes flickered as they moved forward. The terrain of this world was extremely strange. The entire land was riddled with holes. It was rumored that during the world-ending battle, a part of the world had been razed to the ground and everyone had perished. Such a strong death chi. After that, their pupils involuntarily constricted. They saw that on the ground, a silhouette had actually appeared. That person had been sitting there in a daze, his eyes were lifeless as he stared into the distance. The living dead. When they saw that person, they immediately knew that it was another living dead. However, this living dead's realm wasn't high. He was very ordinary and posed no threat to them. And so, they continued forward. Along the way, they saw many living corpses. They had no aura of life, but they truly existed. Some of the living corpses were even doing the same thing over and over again. They also saw a living corpse hugging a piece of clothing. Although the clothing was extremely ancient, it hadn't decayed. It was a woman's clothing. The living corpse hugged it tightly as if it was afraid of losing it. Their gazes gradually turned heavy. There were actually so many living corpses in this ancient battlefield. What did this mean? Could it be that those who died back then, there was someone who executed a heaven-defying innate technique that allowed them to continue living? However, they were using a different method, living corpses to exist in this world. How tragic was this? At this moment, they suddenly felt a cold beam of light shooting over. The will of death enveloped their bodies. They turned their gazes in a certain direction, only to see a silhouette directly soaring up into the sky. The silhouette roared, "Kill!" This voice was filled with boundless killing intent. That silhouette's speed was incomparably fast, like lightning, directly rushing towards one of the Empyreans. That Empyrean instantly unleashed a torrential rain of swords. He pointed his finger downwards and instantly, the radiance of a holy sword descended from the heavens, capable of destroying everything in its path. With a poochie sound, that Empyrean silhouette was directly cleaved into two as he coldly snorted. Kill, kill, kill. Another cold voice filled with killing intent rang out. This voice was incomparably desolate, and there were two voices, as though they came from two different people, yet they completely overlapped. Two bolts of lightning continued shooting towards the Empyrean in the air. It was none other than that Empyrean who was cleaved into two. The countenances of the Empyreans drastically changed. They had just relaxed their vigilance when they saw such a shocking scene. This was especially so for the Empyrean who was attacked. His body transformed into a sharp sword as he pierced forward. Only by doing so could he evade this attack. Boom! A gigantic black hand directly grabbed hold of the sharp sword. The sword penetrated through it, slicing into the Empyrean's body. However, the other half of the Empyrean's body blasted out with a punch, causing the sound of shattering to ring out. An incomparably tyrannical strength caused the sword to shatter as a scream of misery rang out. That Empyrean's body was smashed into pieces as blood rained down from the sky. This scene was too terrifying. The other Empyreans were all stunned. After that, they saw the other half of the Empyrean's body shouting. Kill, 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 kill. We can't kill him, retreat. The Empyrean silhouettes flickered as they retreated. They actually didn't dare to fight. It wasn't that they couldn't win against the Empyrean, but rather, the Empyrean was simply unkillable. How could they fight? The Empyrean's body was already dead. That Empyrean's sword had already cleaved the Empyrean into two, yet it was useless. The Empyrean's two halves attacked at the same time. Just the sight of this scene caused the hearts of the Empyrean to tremble. Kill, kill, kill. The cold voice seemed to penetrate through the ancient times, resounding through the air. Many Empyreans inclined their heads and stared at the sky. After that, numerous Empyreans soared up into the air, rushing towards the Empyrean who just appeared. At this moment, the Empyreans' countenances were as pale as paper, they only felt that doomsday had arrived. How could this be? How could this world be so terrifying? Not long after, screams of misery resounded through this entire space. Under the black sun, the Empyreans who tried to scout the area all died here. In addition, since they could reach this place, it was clear that the others could as well. More and more news was transmitted to the supreme ancient immortal realms. For a period of time, many peak powers in the supreme ancient immortal realms moved out. The news started to circulate, causing a huge commotion. Compared to the supreme ancient immortal realms, Azure Mystic was as calm as ever. Since this was a forbidden ground, no one in Azure Mystic would be able to enter it. They had no way to know what happened there. Qin Wentian was still in Heaven Empyrean City, waiting for news. With so many experts arriving in Azure Mystic, it was impossible for there to be no news. In truth, he hoped that ancient Azure Mystic wouldn't appear. If not, it wouldn't be a good thing for the current Azure Mystic immortal realms. He suddenly thought of something. The secret recorded in the Wenxin Temple was something that was covered in dust to the current Azure Mystic. The sealed Azure Mystic immortal realms wouldn't know about it. But what about the supreme ancient immortal realms? The supreme ancient immortal realms had boundless history, they would surely have a great deal of information regarding this world-ending battle. Maybe, they had never given up on searching for it. Hence, in the supreme ancient immortal realms, the world-ending battle was definitely not a secret. At this moment, in the Heaven Empyrean Palace, the Southern Phoenix Matriarch and the Dark North Immortal Emperor came over to seek guidance on some questions regarding Empyreans. Qin Wentian suddenly felt like making a trip to the forbidden ground of the Immortal Law Mountain in the northern regions. Back then, it was none other than that old freak who sent him into the supreme ancient immortal realms. But now, even Qin Wentian wasn't confident that he would be able to find that old freak. That old freak was simply too mysterious. Palace Lord, this subordinate has something to report. Su Li's voice drifted over from outside. Qin Wentian replied, speak. According to the news, a group of mysterious experts suddenly appeared in the eastern regions of our immortal realms. This subordinate suspects that they are from the supreme ancient immortal realms. Suli spoke. Got it. You can leave for now. Continue to pay close attention to the movements in the immortal realms. Once there's any news, report back to me immediately. Qin Wendian spoke. Yes, Palace Lord. Suli acknowledged and left. Several days later, Suli made another report. Many more experts appeared in the central regions of the immortal realms. And after some time, Suli came to report again. Mysterious experts also appeared in the southern regions of the immortal realms. However, they didn't cause any commotion and were extremely low profile. For a very long period of time, Suli continued to make many reports regarding the arrival of mysterious experts. Also, the frequency of the reports grew more and more frequent. And this was only the power they discovered. There were still many that they hadn't discovered yet. Qin Wendian was very clear what this meant. A large number of experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms had arrived. What should come would eventually come. Qin Wendian passed down his orders, telling the various powers to pay close attention to the movements of the mysterious experts and find their final destination. It wasn't easy to track the movements of Empyreans. However, the Heaven Empyrean gave the order. Countless powers in the immortal realms became spies, constantly sending news to Qin Wendian's Heaven Empyrean Palace in Heaven Empyrean City. With regards to the movements of the mysterious experts in the immortal realms, there was a common point. That was, they appeared most frequently in the northern regions of the immortal realms. Also, their locations were the former Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. The target continued to shrink. Qin Wendian told the Dark North Immortal Emperor to pay close attention to the movements of the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. There was no need to doubt the influence of the Dark North Immortal Emperor in the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. Very soon, he found the location where the mysterious experts left their last traces. Their final destination was the forbidden ground of the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom, in the depths of the Mountain of Laws. After Qin Wendian learned of this news, he was completely stunned. The location was actually the forbidden ground of the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. Within the Heaven Empyrean Palace, Qin Wendian stood there speechlessly for a long time. The forbidden ground of the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom, this place was too familiar. Could this be a coincidence? Qin Wendian silently mused. Chapter 17:15. The forbidden ground of the Dark North Immortal Mountain was rarely visited by people. This was especially so for the depths of the forbidden ground. Back then, Qin Wendian also entered there by mistake. But now, in the depths of the forbidden grounds of the Dark North Immortal Mountain, in a place where outsiders couldn't see, a large number of experts were gathered. Experts were as common as the clouds, and these experts all belonged to different camps. Right now, not only were there Empyreans here, many immortal emperors were also sent here to carry out orders. Empyreans, even to many powers in the supreme ancient immortal realms, they were considered rare. For example, the lifelong realm was boundlessly vast, but how many Empyreans were there? Even the World Palace lords of the 9 world palaces were merely characters at this level. Naturally, if one were to look at the entire supreme ancient immortal realms, there were simply too many Empyreans. The supreme ancient immortal realms were simply too vast. There were countless world overlords here, and Empyreans were like grains of sand in the Ganges River. On an ancient peak in the Immortal Law Mountain, Qin Wendian arrived. He stood at the peak of the Immortal Law Mountain and stared into the distance. Although he was now at the Empyrean realm, his immortal sense wasn't invincible in the forbidden ground. It was restricted. In the air far away, a resplendent light suddenly flashed as a group of experts appeared in the air. They were all clad in resplendent robes, and the person in the center looked extremely young. However, his eyes seemed to be golden in color and contained an incomparably terrifying penetrative power. A single glance from him seemed to be able to pierce through space. He took out a divine weapon. It was an incomparably gigantic ancient bell. With a wave of his hand, the ancient bell flew forward, entering the misty formation of the forbidden ground. In the next instant, a booming sound of the great Tao rang out from the depths of the forbidden ground. The misty space suddenly shone with an incomparably resplendent golden light. In the next instant, the glow of millions of runes bloomed in the air, resembling bolts of lightning that arced through the void, containing the might of the great Tao of heaven and earth within. The bell of the great path continued ringing. Rays of light that pierced through the darkness appeared in the fog. After that, the ancient bell appeared in everyone's field of vision once again. This time, it became extremely large, directly breaking through the shackles of the fog formation and descending into the sky. It released tens of millions of rays of golden light that enveloped the vast and boundless forbidden area. The fog continued to be dispersed. As the bell of the great path rang, the space gradually became clear. Only the endless golden light of lightning could be seen flickering within. His immortal sense was no longer obstructed and his vision grew clearer. Many silhouettes appeared before him. This forbidden ground wasn't as vast as he had imagined. He could see everything with a single glance. Everything was because of the formation. Qin Wendian saw a large number of experts gathered together. They stood in front of a door, and there seemed to be a beam of dark light piercing through the sky. A part of the sky fell there, as though it could lead to another world. The Doomsday Battlefield. Qin Wendian thought of the content recorded in the ancient records as he sighed in his heart. Ancient Azure Mystic, the Doomsday Battlefield. It was buried by a supreme existence using a heaven-defying technique. Now that the seal on Azure Mystic was loosened, it seemed like that existence intentionally wanted the Doomsday Battlefield to be exposed to the world. If not, given his heaven-defying abilities, how would he be able to find this place? Old freak, does this have anything to do with you? Qin Wendian silently mused. Back then, he met that madman in this forbidden ground. But now, there were no traces of that madman at all. The ancient bell flew back, transforming into a palm-sized bell that was held in the palm of the young man. Many experts turned their gazes over, and when they saw the young man, their eyes flashed as though they were trying to guess his identity. Such a divine treasure, he must definitely be an extraordinary character. We pay our respects to Sir Wang. An Empyrean walked out. He seemed to know the identity of this young man and his group as he bowed to him. Although he was also an Empyrean, this Empyrean's attitude towards Sir Wang could only be described as respectful. In any place, there would always be a strict hierarchy. This was even more so in the supreme ancient immortal realms. This point could be seen clearly from this world. Sir Wang. Many people were guessing as their eyes flashed. After that, the eyes of many involuntarily narrowed as shock filled their hearts. All of them walked up and clasped their hands. We pay our respects to Sir Wang. They didn't know Sir Wang's name, but they only knew that he was surnamed Wang and which clan he came from. That was already enough. Sir Wang broke through the illusion formation with a single thought. Truly admirable. Someone praised. That Sir Wang still stood in the air, his attitude was cold. He who was holding on to the ancient bell seemed a little arrogant. Just a mere formation, a smokescreen. Sir Wang's voice was as sharp and filled with arrogance. As long as one heard his words, they would know what sort of person he was. His pride was ingrained deep in his bones and could be seen from his demeanor. However, he naturally had the qualifications to do so. Even in the supreme ancient immortal realms, his clan could already stand at an extremely high position. But although he was arrogant, he was very clear about what he came here for. This time, his clan entrusted everyone to him. He naturally had to obtain some harvest. Did the scouts send any news? Sir Wang asked. Yes, we've already ascertained that this is the legendary world-ending battlefield. Someone spoke. There are many zombies there, they seem to be those who died in the world-ending battle back then. There are also some who are extremely powerful, we can't kill them unless we directly crush them into dust. Many of the people we sent here have already died. There's no news at all. There's one more point. That person continued, this gate is a one-way gate. After entering, it will vanish. Currently, no one has found the exit yet. In that case, continue to scout. Sir Wang calmly spoke. Many people aren't willing to go there anymore. That person spoke in a light voice. Sir Wang's eyes flashed, he instantly understood. Even for Empyreans, there was an extremely high possibility that they would die if they entered. Let alone the fact that many powers were using immortal emperors to scout the area, it was basically a path of death. Those subordinates most probably didn't want to send themselves to death. Although they were curious about the ancient battlefield, their lives were more important. Aren't there many immortal emperors in this immortal realms? Just send them there directly. Sir Wang calmly spoke, his tone was extremely calm. It was like in his eyes, the lives of the immortal emperors in this immortal realms weren't even worth mentioning. It was basically insufficient to cause any ripples in his heart. That person's eyes flashed. At this moment, another person spoke, Senior, you might not know this but right now, the Azure Mystic Immortal Realms has a new ruler. He calls himself the Heaven Empyrean and forbids people from the Supreme Ancient Immortal Realms from doing anything in the Immortal Realms. Before this, many powerful characters from the Supreme Ancient Immortal Realms have already been killed by this Heaven Empyrean. Heaven Empyrean, what arrogant words. That young man's eyes flashed with disdain. He calmly spoke, after the world-ending battle, Azure Mystic is no longer the ancient Azure Mystic. It has also been sealed for so many years and is nothing but a weak and desolate place. Yet, you still dare to proclaim yourself as the Heaven Empyrean? Truly a frog at the bottom of a well. Since you are the Heaven Empyrean of Azure Mystic, tell him to send immortal emperors from Azure Mystic to scout the way. He won't give the command. At this moment, Qin Wentian spoke from afar. The eyes of the young man surnamed Wang turned over, staring at Qin Wentian. The sharpness in his eyes caused people to feel a sense of fear. Who are you? He asked. The frog at the bottom of a well that you are referring to. Qin Wentian replied. Heaven Empyrean. The young man surnamed Wang mockingly laughed. Calling himself the Heaven Empyrean in Azure Mystic? What arrogant words. Do you know what sort of character the Heaven Lord of the ancient battlefield was? Although his status was transcendent, he had read through the ancient records and learned of the history from countless years ago. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart and worship the world annihilation Heaven Lord. He wanted nothing more than to be able to see the ancient Heaven Lord slaying all heavenly deities in a single battle, burying an entire world. As the Heaven Lord, he wasn't willing to lower his head even if he had to die in battle. I don't know. However, since I'm the Overlord of Azure Mystic, I naturally have to protect it. Most probably, the Heaven Lord was the same back then as well. Qin Wentian calmly spoke. In that case, let's see if you have the ability to be mentioned in the same breath as the imperishable Heaven Lord. The young man waved his hand. The divine bell in his hand flew out and instantly expanded in size, transforming into a gigantic golden ancient bell that radiated the might of the great Tao. In an instant, heavenly might enveloped everything as boundless destructive runes and lightning locked onto Qin Wentian. There was no way for him to evade. Qin Wentian's body was enveloped by boundless runic light. His fiend god body, Buddha and devil body, the Vajra Holy will protecting him. All sorts of defenses were unleashed, resembling an indestructible law body. Boundless runic lightning blasted over as crackling sounds of destruction rang out unceasingly, penetrating through everything. Qin Wentian's defenses were shattered. He leaped through the air and retreated. However, the might of the runes of the great Tao penetrated through his body and he was instantly flung far away. With a groan of misery, many cracks appeared on his body and he was on the verge of shattering. Powerful undying energy and life force simultaneously healed his injured body. He stared at the divine bell in the distance as his heart trembled. The might of the great Tao contained within the bell was unblockable and was definitely a supreme treasure. Although this young man was powerful, he most probably wasn't strong enough to unleash the full might of the bell. If not, his body would have already been shattered by a single strike. There were too many experts in the supreme ancient immortal realms. Now that the entrance to ancient Azure Mystic has appeared, all the experts of the supreme ancient immortal realms gathered here. It was unknown if this would lead to a calamity. The Heaven Empyrean? The young man mockingly spoke. But at this moment, an Empyrean beside him transmitted his voice over to remind him, "Young master, now that the seal on Azure Mystic has loosened, that major character is still someone from Azure Mystic. He has sealed Azure Mystic for so many years, most probably, he doesn't wish for Azure Mystic to be destroyed. It's best not to antagonize that major character." The eyes of the young man flashed. Just when he was about to act, he thought about it and nodded his head. Although he didn't know what sort of character that major character was, he was still a demon after all. Since this was the case, he might as well spare the immortal emperors of Azure Mystic this time around. With a wave of his hand, the divine treasure bell flew back into his palm. He stared at everyone as he spoke. "If no one is willing to lead the way, let's wait for more powers to gather before we enter together." Chapter 17:16. The name of this young man was Wang Yi. His clan was extremely powerful in the supreme ancient immortal realms and wasn't something the overlords of a world could compare to. Even for ordinary world overlords, they would be extremely polite to him. One could say that although he was only at the half-step world overlord realm, it was only a matter of time before he stepped into the world overlord realm. There was no need for him to be respectful when facing world overlords, he only needed to treat them normally. Hence, a mere Empyrean character like the Azure Mystic Heavenly Sovereign was nothing in his eyes. If it wasn't for the reminder from the people beside him, he would have directly acted to kill Qin Wentian. Sending the immortal emperors of the Azure Mystic immortal realms to their deaths, to him, was just an insignificant matter. In his clan, it was unknown how many immortal emperors would risk their lives for him with a single command. It was just that he didn't bring so many people with him today. Immortal emperors, their cultivation bases weren't high enough. In this place, it was useless for him to have so many immortal emperors. From a certain perspective, Qin Wentian did indeed have the qualifications to not care about this Heaven Empyrean of Azure Mystic. Qin Wentian's heart was heavy. It wasn't because he was injured but because of the treasures the young man brought with him, as well as the meaning behind everyone's respectful attitude. The status of this young man was extremely transcendent. Azure Mystic had attracted the attention of the hegemonic powers of the supreme ancient immortal realms. How could his heart not be heavy? His gaze turned to the person who spoke earlier. His gaze was extremely sharp, directly piercing through space, staring at that person. That expert was also coincidentally looking in Qin Wentian's direction. With just a single glance, he felt the heavens and earth changing. His consciousness actually fell into a trance, entering an independent space, a true illusion space. It was like he saw a pair of incomparably demonic eyes. Those were the eyes of astral souls, the eyes of true illusion. Under the power of source origins, a single glance could create illusions in the world. A crisp sound rang out as that person screamed in misery, dying on the spot. The people around him all retreated, their countenances paled as they stared at Qin Wentian. "I've never forbidden people from the supreme ancient immortal realms from doing anything. Those who intentionally started a war should be executed." Qin Wentian emotionlessly spoke. He didn't ask who the young man was and didn't care about his identity. Naturally, he also didn't care about Wang Yi's attitude. This was Azure Mystic, his will was the law. Even if Wang Yi had a super powerful magic weapon. The Celestial Emperor didn't attack Wang Yi, but turned to kill this person. Moreover, he deliberately explained it. Could it be that he's afraid of Wang Yi? Thinking of Wang Yi's identity and how powerful he was, everyone nodded. It seemed like that was the case. At this moment, Qin Wentian continued, "However, the experts of the supreme ancient immortal realms are not allowed to wreak havoc in Azure Mystic. No one." The word anyone naturally referred to something. No matter what your identity is, or what sort of experts you are from the supreme ancient immortal realms, this Wang Yi of the Wang clan was naturally included. He who was forced back by a single strike, didn't show any signs of weakness at all. He immediately changed the topic and spoke such domineering words, causing many people to have strange expressions on their faces. Was he not worried that Wang Yi would kill him on the spot in a fit of rage? As the Heaven Empyrean of the Azure Mystic Immortal Realms, Qin Wentian has killed many Empyreans before. But no matter what, he was only the leader of the Azure Mystic Immortal Realms. How high was Wang Yi's status? In addition to the terrifying divine weapons and treasures he had, it was very possible for him to kill the Heaven Empyrean of the Azure Mystic Immortal Realms. Wang Yi calmly glanced at Qin Wentian, his eyes were filled with mockery. He decided not to act against the immortal emperors of Azure Mystic because of the respect he had for that expert who sealed the Azure Mystic Immortal Realms. As for a mere Qin Wentian, would he even care about him? Qin Wentian's words were merely self-mockery in his eyes. It was laughable. Hence, there was no need for him to care about it as it would be beneath his status. Qin Wentian stood on the ancient peak, remaining at the entrance of the forbidden ground. His white robes fluttered in the wind, exuding a carefree aura. For the next period of time, more and more experts rushed here. Many Empyreans were from the supreme ancient immortal realms. Other than this, there were also some experts with transcendent statuses. They were the same as Wang Yi, having terrifying origins. Many Empyreans were extremely respectful and humble when they saw them. There was no exception, all of them exuded a transcendent aura. Regardless of their age, all of them were the same. With different statuses, the aura they exuded would naturally be different as well. In the former forbidden ground of the Dark North Immortal Mountain, with a single glance, one could see experts from different camps here. Qin Wentian, who stood on the ancient peak, felt his heart grow heavier when he saw this scene. Such a terrifying power could easily destroy the people of Azure Mystic with a wave of their hands. In addition, he basically had no way to stop them. There were simply too many Empyreans here, true experts were as common as the clouds. At this moment, Empyreans who were extremely rare even in the lifelong realm were like the multitude of mortals, not conspicuous at all. Only those characters with the same status as Wang Yi had transcendent and lofty statuses. Qin Wentian heard the discussions of many people. He knew that these people were from the heavenly deity race of the supreme ancient immortal realms. Heavenly deities. Qin Wentian's heart trembled. From the ancient records in the Wenqin Temple, he knew that those characters who descended from the heavens and destroyed ancient Azure Mystic were all known as heavenly deities, lofty and unexcelled in the world. Right now, these experts who came to this forbidden ground also claimed to be from the heavenly deity race. Could it be that their ancestors were those heavenly deities from the past? Or could it be that the heavenly deity race was the title given to those supreme hegemonic powers in the supreme ancient immortal realms? If this was the case, Qin Wentian also understood why Wang Yi had such a powerful divine weapon in his hands. People from the heavenly deity race. Just this name alone was sufficient to shock countless experts in the supreme ancient immortal realms. In the supreme ancient immortal realms, most probably, they were all characters at the peak, let alone in this Azure Mystic that was sealed. How could such characters not be lofty and lofty? Since the heavenly deity race sent these characters to Azure Mystic to deal with the matter in the forbidden ground, there was no need to doubt their strength. For those experts from the heavenly deity race who appeared, there were even some who manifested strange phenomena. Earlier, Wang Yi's eyes were golden, it was unknown what kind of ability that was. There were also some who actually had wings on their bodies. That didn't seem to be a cultivation art or innate technique, they seemed to be born with wings. Also, there were incomparably resplendent complicated runes on the wings, resembling the runes of the Great Tao. Qin Wentian guessed that this most probably had something to do with the bloodline of their heavenly deity race. The heavenly deity race had an extremely powerful inheritance. If their bloodlines were to awaken, they wouldn't be like those unknown bloodlines in the lower world. Their bloodlines would be truly supremely powerful. We can enter now. At this moment, an expert from the heavenly deity race spoke. Right now, the experts gathered here were already a terrifying force. He didn't want to wait any longer. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. He had a muscular build and his palms were larger than ordinary people. Everyone, let's move out. The man with a pair of wings on his back spoke. The wings slowly flapped, and even though the runic light on them didn't light up, it still gave off an extremely terrifying feeling. It was as though as long as the runic light shone, it would be able to unleash a terrifying might. There will definitely be more experts coming later. But if we can't even obtain anything with such a lineup, it would be meaningless no matter how many experts we send. Another person who looked extremely young spoke. Although he was a male, he was extremely handsome and exuded a demonic sense of beauty. Such elegance was something many females couldn't compare to. He was definitely a handsome man. Are you worried that your good fortune would be snatched away by others? A cold voice drifted over. The man who spoke exuded a terrifyingly sharp aura. Just by casually standing there, he gave off a lofty and aloof feeling, as though he was extremely lonely. At the center of his brows, there was a vertical line that looked extremely demonic. It was like a line that would occasionally move, as though it could open up and transform into a pair of eyes. One figure after another moved forward. The experts of the heavenly deity race took the lead. In an instant, the great army was mobilized. Countless experts followed behind them, preparing to enter together with them. It was as though they were the followers of the heavenly deity race. The experts from the heavenly deity race from the supreme ancient immortal realms all had terrifying influence in their respective regions. The people from these regions naturally followed the experts from the heavenly deity race. Right now, they already knew that ancient Azure Mystic was filled with danger. If they followed behind these people, they would naturally have a higher chance of survival. If even the experts from the heavenly deity race couldn't deal with them, they would die for sure. The experts from the various powers all entered in a line, entering the forbidden ground. The experts from the heavenly deity race opened up the path while countless people followed after them. All of them entered the forbidden ground, stepping into that unknown place. To Qin Wentian, that forbidden ground was also an unknown place. However, he knew that there would definitely be someone who knew some secrets. Back then, that crazy old freak had always been in this forbidden ground. It was impossible for him to not know the secrets of this place. In addition, Qin Wendian suspected that if it wasn't for that crazy old freak leaving, no one would be able to unravel the secrets of this forbidden ground and find this gate. Even the Empyreans from the heavenly deity race wouldn't be able to do so. Empyreans from the heavenly deity race definitely wouldn't be able to reach the level of that crazy old freak. The number of experts continued to decrease until all of them entered. Qin Wentian stood on the ancient peak for a long time, quietly watching everything. Finally, he stepped out and also moved forward, directly passing through that mysterious gate. In the next instant, his silhouette vanished from his original location and appeared in another part of the sky. The sky was dark, the sun was black, and there were 9 gigantic black rocks that resembled constellations. They shone with a mysterious luster, giving off a heavy sense of pressure. Ancient Azure Mystic, the battlefield of the apocalypse? Qin Wentian inclined his head and stared at the gloomy sky. Even the sun was black in color and radiated a sinister aura. It truly felt like the end of the world. Back then, how terrifying was the world-ending war in ancient Azure Mystic exactly? Even the sun had turned black in color and was buried by the sun. Chapter 1717. The experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms continued forward. They were similarly enveloped by the sinister aura, but their hearts were also filled with fervor, filled with intense anticipation. This was truly the battlefield recorded in the ancient records of their clans. This was especially so for the descendants of the heavenly deity race. Their records were the clearest when it came to the world-ending battle in ancient Azure Mystic back then. They knew much more compared to others. Back then, how many heaven-defying characters died here, including the heavenly deities of the supreme ancient immortal realms. The heaven-defying divine weapons and treasures of these heavenly deities were also buried together with them. Ancient heavenly deities naturally had divine depositories on them, these were all heaven-defying treasures. In addition, during the world-ending battle in ancient Azure Mystic, how many transcendent powers of ancient Azure Mystic were annihilated? Some of these powers were as powerful as the heavenly deity race. What sort of divine depositories did these powers have? Everything was simply unimaginable. If they could obtain some of the divine depositories left behind by ancient Azure mystic, it would definitely be an extremely great opportunity for their clans to grow stronger. There were simply too many experts in the supreme ancient immortal realms. Everyone hoped that they could stand at the peak. However, given how vast the world is, how many supreme experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms were there? The sound of air being torn apart rang out as the experts moved towards the ancient battlefield in ancient Azure mystic. In this desolate world, there were no signs of life, the atmosphere was gloomy and filled with despair. There were zombies appearing in the immortal sense. These zombies were all very quiet and were busy with their own matters. It was like they had been doing this for millions of years. They had no thoughts of their own, only their obsession before they died, unwilling to fade away. When the powerful zombies saw the arrival of so many experts, their empty eyes stared up at the sky. In an instant, a fearsome killing intent radiated from them as they directly soared up into the air. Kill, kill, kill. Similar to what the scouts encountered back then, many zombies directly rushed up into the air, not fearing death at all. Humph, that expert with a vertical line between his brows directly opened his third eye. The vertical line between his brows opened, transforming into a pair of vertical eyes that directly shot out a beam of light, cleaving apart the heavens and earth. With a poochie sound, a living corpse that was rushing up into the air was directly cleaved apart. However, his movements didn't stop. His body that was cleaved apart didn't feel any pain at all. After being cleaved apart, he continued to kill his way up into the sky, causing countless people behind him to feel their hair stand on end. Were all the living corpses here so terrifying? They were even scarier than normal people. Since they were already dead, they were naturally difficult to kill. That expert coldly snorted, and the light between his brows became even brighter. A beam of annihilation shot out, directly enveloping the two halves of the body. With a soft poochie sound, the body of the living corpse shattered into countless fragments that dissipated between heaven and earth. There was no one who couldn't be killed, even if they were the living corpses, as long as they were strong enough. The others also attacked one after another. The person who was born with wings was extremely powerful. The wings behind him only trembled slightly, and in just an instant, his body suddenly turned into thousands of phantoms. Incomparably dazzling light from the wings slashed out. It was as though the entire world was filled with his figure, all of them were his wings of the great Tao, cutting the incoming living corpses into pieces. He quietly floated in the air, his body still in the same place, flapping his wings as though he had never attacked before. Killing transcendence is a piece of cake. Qin Wentian watched the battle between the experts from the heavenly god race. He naturally could tell that these living corpses had extraordinary strength and could be said to be undying. But even so, they were still easily killed. Ordinary Empyreans couldn't even withstand a single strike before them. The experts from the heavenly god race were transcendent existences. Very swiftly, the sounds of killing faded away. Those Empyrean living corpses were all killed, their bodies shattered into pieces, no longer existing. Let's go. The experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms continued on their way. On the way, more and more living corpses soared up into the air, killing their way towards them. However, all of them were destroyed by the experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms. Just the Empyreans from the heavenly god race from the supreme ancient immortal realms, none of the living corpses could obstruct them. At the very least, the living corpses at the Empyrean realm were far from sufficient, they basically couldn't pose much of an obstacle to them. At this moment, everyone came to a desolate mountain range. This mountain range was filled with an ancient aura of death, boundlessly vast and boundlessly deep. The experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms weren't moved, they directly entered. How could they be afraid? They were prepared to continue forward, exploring the secrets of the ancient battlefield and searching for good fortune. At a certain location in the desolate mountain range, a figure suddenly appeared, blocking the path of everyone. No one could see clearly how he appeared, it was like he had long appeared there. But earlier, the immortal senses of everyone couldn't detect his existence. After that, more and more figures appeared. Their robes were tattered and some of them had flaws in their bodies. Either their arms were destroyed or they lost half their faces. Their expressions were extremely malevolent and terrifying. The one who caused the hearts of everyone to tremble the most was a female. She had a countenance so beautiful that it could even shame the moon and flowers. However, there was actually a terrifying scar on her from head to toe. It was so shocking that no one dared to stare at her. Seems like an ancient power from ancient Azure mystic was destroyed here back then. These living corpses still have their obsessions from when they were alive, unwilling to leave. What deep emotions they have. Someone spoke in a low voice. However, these Empyreans from the supreme ancient immortal realms wouldn't allow anyone to obstruct their path. Wang Yi took out that terrifying great bell. With a wave of his hand, the great bell flew forward. It was incomparably huge, enveloping the boundless heavens and earth. Destructive lightning shot out, annihilating this space. The sound of an ancient bell resounded through the heavens and earth, like the death knell of death. Many of the living dead were directly destroyed, their corpses not even remaining, completely vanishing into thin air. Since they are already dead, why is there a need to leave their obsessions in the mortal world? It's time for them to leave. A terrifying phenomenon manifested behind another Empyrean from the heavenly deity race. Beams of light from the great Tao shot out, destroying everything in their path. The Empyreans from the supreme ancient immortal realms all rushed forward, destroying all the living corpses. Puchi. At this moment, an incomparably resplendent killing light suddenly radiated out from the void. In an instant, several supreme experts of the supreme ancient immemorial realms were killed on the spot, their bodies disintegrating into dust. The expressions of those experts changed when they saw the sudden death of several supreme experts, as vigilance flashed in their eyes. Chi. More beams of killing light shot out from the void. That Empyrean who had a look of wariness in his eyes screamed in agony as his body was severed from the waist. The other Empyreans all hurriedly retreated, but the sounds of explosions rang out unceasingly as more and more Empyreans died. Countless experts rushed over in that direction, but they only saw that the beams of killing light were formless and formless, shuttling through the void as more and more people died. Boom! The bell chimes of the great Tao suddenly rang out. Wang Yi controlled the ancient divine bell to descend, enveloping the heavens and earth, destroying everything. A deafening sound of collision rang out, the ancient bell seemed to have been struck by an incomparably powerful force. After that, on the desolate land ahead, a figure appeared. This person only had half a face and was extremely malevolent. His back was facing everyone, giving off a sense of loneliness. The hearts of everyone trembled. This was the power of a world overlord. When this living corpse was alive, he must have been a world overlord existence. Since he has already died, he should return. Senior, why must you be so stubborn? Wang Yi spoke. However, as the sound of his voice faded, the living corpse's silhouette had already vanished. Wang Yi's eyes gleamed with a terrifying golden light as a golden killing domain manifested in the surroundings. The ancient bell radiated a supreme might, sweeping through everything. At this moment, everyone finally saw the killing light of the void. Within the golden domain, the movements of the undead seemed to have been slowed down, becoming extremely clear. That killing light was none other than the undead himself. He was able to execute the killing of the void, he was invisible and formless, he was able to blend into the void. Attack! Wang Yi roared. The ancient bell radiated an incomparably resplendent light of the great Tao that expanded frenziedly, enveloping this entire space. Even if one escaped into the void within the space enveloped by the ancient bell, they wouldn't be able to escape the killing might of the ancient bell. Tens of thousands of beams of destructive light of the great Tao shot out from the ancient bell. Booming sounds rang out unceasingly as the ancient bell vibrated, shaking the entire space. With a poochie sound, Wang Yi groaned in pain, he felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. If this continued on, although his divine weapons and treasures were powerful enough, he wouldn't be able to control them. He would be injured from the impact. Why are you still not attacking? Wang Yi spoke. Finally, the ancient bell was forced back. Wang Yi coughed out blood. Once the living corpse appeared before him, it wanted to kill him on the spot. Wang Yi's expression was cold to the extreme. His golden eyes gleamed with a resplendent light that enveloped this space. His eyes seemed to shoot out two heaven-splitting swords, slashing apart his opponent. But even so, he was still heavily injured. Blood flowed from his golden eyes. An expert from the heavenly deity race clad in snow-white robes took out a white feather fan. With a wave of his fan, a terrifying cold energy of the great Tao manifested in the air, sealing everything in ice. A living corpse appeared, his body covered in layers of frost. The winged expert from the heavenly deity race flapped his wings and vanished without a trace, directly appearing at the location where his opponent was. His figure transformed into a myriad of illusory lights as a silver spear suddenly appeared in his hands. He consecutively unleashed a myriad of spear arts, causing the space around him to be lacerated. That living corpse's body was pierced through repeatedly, but it seemed like he didn't feel anything. With a single step, he vanished again and directly appeared beside that expert, unleashing another attack. The winged expert from the heavenly deity race was greatly shocked. His wings of the great Tao enveloped the entire space, radiating boundless light. After that, everyone saw his body trembling madly, flashing unceasingly in the air. Finally, with a thunderous boom, the body of that expert from the heavenly deity race was injured and was forced back. Even his wings of the great Tao were damaged. Resplendent light flashed, the wings of the great Tao gradually recovered to their original state. As for that world overlord level living corpse, he actually vanished completely. These experts from the heavenly deity race rely on their innate techniques and supreme divine weapons. They actually have the strength to annihilate world overlords. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed. However, the feeling that this living corpse world overlord gave him was somewhat weak. He merely didn't fear death and seemed extremely powerful. However, the world overlord had lost his spiritual qi and wasn't able to unleash his full strength. Chapter 17-18. Blood flowed from the corner of Wang Yi's mouth. His eyes gleamed with sharpness. As expected of the ancient battlefield, they actually encountered a world overlord zombie so quickly. If this world overlord zombie had intelligence, he most probably wouldn't be so easy to deal with. Cultivation realms could allow one to comprehend a world heart and give birth to a heaven heart mandate. This was definitely extremely terrifying. A heaven heart mandate was also known as heaven's will. In the truest sense, it had surpassed the Empyrean realm and reached another level. However, since they came here from the supreme ancient immortal realms, they naturally came prepared. How could they retreat? Their powerful immortal senses extended forward, exploring the boundlessly vast desolate mountain range. There seemed to be no end to this place, it was boundlessly vast. They also understood that for a truly powerful power, their territory would naturally be boundless. The heavenly deity race they were from was the same as well. Although it was said to be a race, it was actually comparable to an entire world. After countless years of development, how strong would a race be? How large would it be? This was simply unimaginable. Their population was already extremely terrifying. Hence, the larger the desolate land, the higher the chances of them encountering good fortune. Many Empyreans who followed them felt their hearts shaking. Even though they have cultivated for many years and have already entered the Empyrean realm, they still found it hard to maintain their calmness under this heavy pressure. This was especially so when that world overlord zombie appeared earlier. Many people have already died. The experts here could easily sweep through an entire world. Each of them was extremely terrifying, but in this desolate land, they seemed extremely tiny and insignificant. Under the dark sun, they continued moving forward in a small area. If one looked down from the sun, they would be able to see that they were like tiny particles moving about. In the center of the desolate land, there were also many similarly tiny figures. They were scattered in all directions, quietly standing there, as though they have been guarding this place for countless years. Those quietly standing figures seemed to have discovered something. Their empty eyes suddenly gleamed with a sinister light filled with killing intent. After that, their bodies moving towards a certain direction. Halt! Almost at the same time, the experts from the deity race who entered from the outside world waved their hands and said. They felt uneasy, as if they had entered a wasteland where danger lurked in every corner. On the way forward, this feeling of uneasiness grew even stronger. A figure flickered and appeared in their vision silently. This figure was in tatters and his body was pierced through. There was no flesh or blood within his body and his eyes didn't have the luster of a living person. Clearly, this was a living corpse. Back then in the ancient battlefield where Azure Mystic was destroyed, there were many people who died but their souls didn't scatter. Could it be that the imperishable Heaven Lord used some heaven-defying methods to resurrect them as living corpses? More figures appearing before their eyes, surrounding the experts who entered the ancient battlefield. Before these people acted, it was impossible to ascertain how strong they were. However, the uneasiness in the hearts of the experts had already reached a peak. At that time, that world overlord also silently appeared in the ancient battlefield like this. If there were several world overlord level living corpses among the people who appeared, what kind of terrifying consequences would there be? They didn't dare to think any further. Maybe, given their Empyrean cultivation bases, wanting to search for good fortune in this ancient battlefield was simply wishful thinking. Pucci. At this moment, someone's body was directly severed from the waist. That person didn't even have the time to react. He lowered his head and stared at the lower half of his body as a look of boundless terror appeared on his face. No! An incomparably miserable voice rang out. He only felt terror in his heart. The others were also trembling as they stared at the scene before them. But in the next instant, they saw more and more people being sliced apart. This entire space seemed to have transformed into a world that was being sliced apart, and was currently being sliced apart. At the World Overlord level, this is the Skyrend Heavenheart Mandate. The fusion of spatial energy and the source origin of the sword is able to create a Heavenheart Mandate. Skyrend Heavenheart Mandate is able to directly tear apart a piece of space. Someone exclaimed in shock. Evidently, there were world overlords among the living corpses who acted. They didn't say anything and directly killed the invaders. This was the territory they were protecting. Although they no longer had the ability to think, they still retained their will to kill all invaders with no mercy. Heavenheart Mandates were also known as Heaven's Will. They had already surpassed the boundaries of source origins and were a type of transcendent energy, a brand new type of energy. In the void flames suddenly appeared, directly rushing into the bodies of everyone, incinerating them. Many people screamed as their bodies were instantly incinerated into nothingness. It was an extremely miserable sight. Another person acted. This person was also a world overlord who had comprehended a Heavenheart Mandate. In the blink of an eye, countless screams rang out as countless experts died. The expressions of the experts from the heavenly deity race all changed. Young Master Wang, save me! Someone screamed, pleading for help from the experts from the heavenly deity race. If it wasn't for the fact that they didn't act, Transcendence would still be as weak as grass and wouldn't be able to withstand a single strike. This was because there were several world overlords among the crowd. How could they fight against them? Even Empyreans wouldn't be able to do so. Terror spread. Everything happened in just a short span of a few breaths of time. 1/3 of the experts had already died, their deaths extremely miserable. Before Wang Yi, the ancient bell radiated an incomparably resplendent light that enveloped him, preventing him from being corroded. His eyes were tightly closed, as though he was communicating with the ancient bell. An instant later, a terrifying might radiated from the ancient bell as bell chimes rang out. Many people felt their souls trembling as they saw the ancient bell flying out. The light from it directly enveloped a world overlord zombie. Boom! The ancient bell flew out by itself, directly enveloping that zombie. That world overlord zombie stepped out as his Heavenheart Mandate erupted forth. Boundless Heavenheart might blasted into the ancient bell, causing intense rumbling sounds to ring out. However, it didn't shatter at all. The light he shot out grew even more resplendent, capable of destroying everything. Beams of light enveloped that world overlord zombie, and from within, a will that didn't belong to Wang Yi erupted forth. That was a heaven heart mandate. It controlled the ancient bell and divine weapons to unleash their power, tearing that world overlord zombie apart. Not only Wang Yi acted, the experts from the various heavenly deity races all acted as well, taking out their supreme divine weapons and unleashing unfathomable might. For a period of time, the might radiating from this desolate area caused even Empyreans to feel fear in their hearts. Qin Wendian stood among the crowd. At this moment, he naturally wouldn't be so foolish as to head out alone. That would simply be courting death. These zombies didn't care who he was, whether he came from the supreme ancient immortal realms or azure mystic. To invaders, they only had a single thought in their minds. That was to slaughter them. Although his combat prowess was extraordinary, he didn't have the confidence to fight against world overlords. World overlords were characters on a completely different level. The higher one's cultivation base was, the more terrifying the disparity between major realms would be. Every step they took was like the distance between heaven and earth. Every step they took was a qualitative leap. Let alone him, even the world overlord's supreme divine weapons of these experts from the heavenly deity race would find it hard to contend against them. Qin Wendian naturally understood that right now, these divine weapons were no longer under the control of those Empyreans from the heavenly deity race. Although it seemed like they were unleashing the might of the divine weapons themselves, in truth, there were other mysteries behind it. Qin Wendian guessed that most probably when they came here, these divine weapons had already been tempered using special methods. There were extremely powerful characters from the supreme ancient immortal realms who could control them from afar to unleash shocking might. The foundations of the heavenly deity race in the supreme ancient immortal realms were simply too deep. No matter what methods they had, it wouldn't be surprising at all. The ancient bell in Wang Yi's hand unleashed the might of the great Tao, destroying everything, killing the world overlord-level zombies. Wang Yi continued his slaughter, destroying everything in his path. There was also a white feathered fan that waved about, causing the entire space to freeze. After that, the frozen zombies shattered into pieces, resembling snowflakes, vanishing like smoke. Clearly, this wasn't something that could be accomplished with Empyrean source energy. It was also world energy, the might of Heavenheart mandates. As for that winged expert from the heavenly deity race, a pair of wings appeared on his back, intertwining with his original wings. He also had a divine spear in his hand. With a flap of his wings, he instantly appeared before an expert and pierced through him, instantly slashing that expert into pieces. The zombies fell unceasingly under his wings and spear. These experts from the heavenly deity race were all going all out. A great battle of mutual destruction erupted. Qin Wendian continued to hide in the crowd. In the surroundings, there were experts dying unceasingly. The number of zombies also decreased unceasingly until they completely vanished. As for the experts who came from the outside world, more than half of them had already died. This was truly terrifying. What place is this exactly? Wang Yi's expression was unsightly. Although he displayed his divine might, he still felt a sense of defeat. Given how confident he was, not long after he entered the ancient battlefield, he already had to borrow external forces to fight. He had no way to fight on his own. This made him feel very uncomfortable. This desolate land might very well have once belonged to a transcendent power. There were already many world overlords whose souls hadn't dissipated. If it was in the past, there would most probably be a group of world overlords here. From this, one could very well imagine how terrifying this transcendent power was. Although he felt a sense of defeat in his heart, there was also anticipation in his heart. He continued moving deeper into the depths of the desolate land. On the way, they encountered many zombies, but all of them were killed by them. After several days, they finally arrived at a certain place. When they stared at the scene before them, great waves of shock rose up in their hearts. From afar, in their field of vision, there was an ancient palace that had long been dilapidated for an unknown number of years. It had already been reduced to ruins. Occasionally, there would be a few incomparably resplendent stone pillars that were still radiating light. However, their radiance had already dimmed. On one of the stone pillars, a figure with only half a body could be seen. He was clad in an incomparably luxurious golden robe and was like a lofty supreme king. However, only half of his body remained, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts. What was even more terrifying was that in front of this supreme character, in the air, a figure quietly floated there. His wings flickered as the radiance radiating from him illuminated the heavens and earth. His wings blotted out the sky, resembling the laws of the great Tao of heaven and earth. This person was like a true heavenly deity. Chapter 17:19. Upon seeing that figure floating in the air, many people involuntarily turned their gazes to the winged expert from the heavenly deity race. Although the wings of the two of them couldn't be compared, there were still some similarities. Both were wings of the great Tao and shone with boundless runic light, resembling the laws of the great Tao. Could it be someone from the same race? That winged expert was an expert from the heavenly deity race of the supreme ancient immortal realms. The name of this race was the winged god race. Their wings were innately born with the bloodline of heavenly deities flowing in their veins, allowing them to inherit the power of the ancient winged gods. At this moment, that winged expert from the heavenly deity race trembled as a look of incomparable agitation appeared on his face. This caused the eyes of everyone to gleam with sharpness. Could it be that the winged expert was truly someone from his race? That figure floating in the air was actually a heavenly deity who once conquered Azure Mystic. Bzz. A raging wind blew. Euphefan's silhouette flashed as he soared into the air. He stared at the winged expert in the air as he called out, "Descendant of the winged god race, Euphephan, pays my respects to ancestor." After speaking, the wings on his body spread open, resembling the wings of the great Tao. They expanded unceasingly, blotting out the sky, clearly indicating his identity as a member of the winged god race. It has been so many years. Has someone from the supreme ancient immortal realms finally arrived? That figure in the air spoke. He actually still had consciousness and wasn't a zombie. This caused everyone to be greatly shocked. Euphephan had an expression of agitation on his face. This was his ancestor, a heavenly deity. Was he actually still alive? Come over. That figure spoke to Euphephan, his tone was filled with disdain. Although Euphephan was an Empyrean, at this moment, he didn't have the slightest bit of disobedience. This was a true heavenly deity. Euphefan's silhouette flashed and appeared before the figure in the air. An expression of agitation could be seen on his face. Heavenly deity, he actually encountered his ancestor. Before he came here, he had a trace of hope, but he didn't expect that it would actually become a reality. Everything in ancient Azure Mystic will be brought back to the supreme ancient immortal realms, it will no longer belong to your Azure Mystic. So what if he buried the heavens and earth to protect Azure Mystic? Ultimately, all his efforts would be for naught. The obsessions you guys have accumulated over the countless years would also turn into nothingness. That heavenly deity spoke, his voice was filled with the vicissitudes of time, like he was speaking from the primordial era. Although some of the hegemonic powers of the supreme ancient Azure Mystic had the records, the ancient. Although there were records of the hegemonic powers of the supreme ancient immortal realms, it was all, it. But now, everything was finally appeared. Back then when your heavenly deity race from the supreme ancient immortal realms descended, the things you failed to accomplish will still not be accomplished today. The king's body that only had half a body left spoke. It was like he hasn't spoken for a very long time. When he spoke, his voice was filled with the vicissitudes of time, but there was still a powerful aura of disdain within. Ha ha ha. That heavenly deity laughed uproariously. Could it be that you didn't see the supreme ancient immortal realms descending here? I will borrow the bodies of my clansmen to destroy everything, purifying the souls of the dead. After speaking, a resplendent light cascaded onto Euphepan from the winged god race. A terrifying mental will gushed into the center of his brows as holy light illuminated the entire space. Euphepan's aura was undergoing a transformation, the world of the great Tao seemed to want to fuse into his body. Not a living person. This scene caused everyone to suddenly understand that this expert from the heavenly deity race wasn't a living person. He was borrowing the strength of his descendants to fight for him. That supreme body of his could dissipate into nothingness, entering Euphefan's body. As for those zombies, even if they are given new life, who can obstruct me? An incomparably tyrannical voice rang out from Euphefan's mouth. It was like Euphephan was no longer under his control, but was controlled by his ancestor, a heavenly deity. Are there any of you from Azure Mystic? At this moment, that powerful existence that only had half a body left spoke. His voice seemed to originate from the void, it wasn't transmitted through his mouth. Clearly, he was different from the other zombies, he also had his own consciousness. The experts here glanced over but no one spoke. All of them were from the supreme ancient immortal realms. Only Qin Wentian was from Azure Mystic. Qin Wentian was hesitating right now. The consciousnesses of these people seemed to be able to control others. He didn't want to be controlled by others. If that was the case, would he still be him? He is the same as me, he has long died. Right now, the only thing that remains is his will. His physical body has already been destroyed and his body is rotting away. Even if you want to seize his body, it's impossible. Only if you are willing to cooperate would you be able to borrow the body of others to fight. That half-body king continued. Stop dreaming. Ancient Azure Mystic has already been destroyed, yet you still have delusions in your heart. The descent of the supreme ancient immortal realms means that everything has ended. I will turn Azure Mystic into dust, turning it into the dust of history. The heavenly deity from the winged god race coldly spoke, exuding an incomparably tyrannical aura. He was currently familiarizing himself with Euphefan's body. Euphefan's entire demeanor was undergoing a transformation, this caused the other experts from the heavenly deity race to feel envy. This was a heavenly deity ancestor, they were also willing to sacrifice their bodies to fight against him. They would surely be able to gain some insights. Earlier, that heavenly deity had already said that it was impossible to forcefully seize the body of someone else. Seems like the time isn't right. Even if I die, the hope of Azure Mystic won't be extinguished. That heavenly deity sighed, filled with boundless emotions. Senior, I'm someone from Azure Mystic. At this moment, Qin Wentian's silhouette flashed as he walked out from the crowd, arriving before the heavenly deity as he spoke. He was initially hesitating but the words spoken by that heavenly deity from the winged god race stimulated him. These experts from the heavenly deity race were all buried here and they all had an intense hatred for Azure Mystic. If this heavenly deity stepped out, he would truly destroy Azure Mystic. He had to stop this no matter what. Hence, he no longer hesitated. Michem. Euphefan stared at Qin Wentian, his expression was extremely sharp. Right now, he was already a heavenly deity. That heavenly deity also stared at Qin Wentian as he asked, in this place, are you the only person from Azure Mystic? Qin Wentian nodded. For countless years, Azure Mystic has been sealed. But now, the seal has loosened and countless people from the supreme ancient immortal realms came here to search for the ancient ruins. They found their way here and all of them are from the supreme ancient immortal realms. What about you? Why are you here? That heavenly deity asked again. I'm someone from Azure Mystic. After that, I entered the supreme ancient immortal realms for cultivation. Because of the great changes in the world, after I returned, I unified Azure Mystic and temporarily became the overlord of Azure Mystic. A few days ago, I found out about the world-ending battle in ancient Azure Mystic and came here to investigate the secrets of ancient Azure Mystic. Qin Wentian spoke. That heavenly deity stared at him. Fine, I will borrow your body for a while. Don't resist my will. That heavenly deity spoke. Qin Wentian nodded and walked over. After that, a powerful will gushed into Qin Wentian's sea of consciousness. Very soon, Qin Wentian felt a mysterious energy. His will was still present and it was like what the other party said, there was no sign of him being possessed. My will fuse into your will, temporarily becoming one with you. I need to sense your strength, you have to cooperate with me. The other party is controlling a junior of the same race and would surely be very compatible. If you are defeated, you would be in danger. That heavenly deity directly communicated with Qin Wentian through his will. He knew what Qin Wentian wanted to say with a single thought. Qin Wentian replied. Seems like the secret of his strength was about to be revealed to this heavenly deity. However, an ancient person who has already died shouldn't reveal anything. After all, this was a heavenly deity-level existence. His will fused together with that heavenly deity's will, guiding the other party to familiarize himself with his strength. Very soon, Qin Wentian's aura also changed. His eyes gleamed with an incomparably terrifying light. Are you really someone from Azure Mystic? You are not from the supreme ancient immortal realms? That heavenly deity sensed Qin Wentian's strength and felt some disbelief in Qin Wentian's words. Qin Wentian didn't say anything more. He directly transmitted pieces of memories to this heavenly deity, including the time when he became the overlord of Azure Mystic and fought against the Empyreans from the supreme ancient immortal realms. The battle next might surpass the limits of your body. Don't resist it or it would be very hard for me to control it. The heavenly deity continued. Qin Wentian nodded. He also wanted to see how powerful a heavenly deity would be in his body. Would it be able to allow him to jump levels for a short period of time? Most probably, that would be the case. At this moment, a resplendent light cascaded down on this space. Yu Fifan's wings spread open, resembling the wings of a true heavenly deity. The might of the great Tao gushed forth and Yu Fifan's eyes gleamed with sharpness. His silhouette flashed as he vanished from his original location. In the next instant, Qin Wentian only felt his body being enveloped by boundless runes of the great Tao. The destructive energy contained within caused him to feel a sense of helplessness. Could Empyreans unleash such might? However, at this moment, the energy in his body suddenly circulated. This wasn't something he could control. His body seemed to vanish from the world, completely vanishing. This feeling was extremely mystical. The boundless killing energy of the great Tao gushed over, but they couldn't touch him at all. He had opened up a space of nothingness by himself. Is this a power that only world overlords can control? A thought appeared in Qin Wentian's heart. He was sensing it. Although this wasn't something he could control and comprehend, he was borrowing the power of his body. This might be extremely useful to his future cultivation as it could point out a direction for him. With a single thought, he could borrow Qin Wentian's body and use the source origins he comprehended to temporarily form a heaven heart mandate. Although this wasn't something that truly belonged to Qin Wentian, this sort of ability could be said to be heaven-shaking. Because, the person controlling his body was a heavenly deity. Chapter 1720. Qin Wentian suddenly thought of something. The heavenly talisman realm in the Azure Mystic Immortal realm seemed to be like this as well. It was situated in a separate space. This was the power of a world overlord, a heaven heart mandate. Naturally, Qin Wentian understood that this wasn't a power he comprehended. Rather, this supremely powerful heavenly deity borrowed his strength to unleash this might. This might was temporary and fake, it wasn't a true heaven heart mandate. After all, he didn't have a world heart. But even so, the might it contained was still extremely terrifying. In addition to the fact that his opponent was a heavenly deity, it would definitely be extremely terrifying. However, that heavenly deity from the winged god race wasn't an ordinary character. He was once a heavenly deity as well. His wings slashed out with the great Tao as boundless killing might of the great Tao bore down on him, lacerating the sky and earth. Even the void was pierced through, there was no way to block it. At this instant, an incomparably resplendent light radiated from Qin Wentian. This wasn't pure light energy, it transformed into millions and millions of motes of light, each containing a fearsome destructive might. Everywhere they passed by, everything was destroyed. The experts from afar frantically retreated. This was because the control of heavenly deities was extremely strong, they didn't allow the shockwaves of the battle to reach them. If not, they would definitely die for sure. Euphephon flapped his gigantic wings, causing the heavens and earth to howl in rage. A powerful Tao might that could annihilate everything manifested. A beam of light shot out, directly penetrating through the boundless killing intent, transforming into the sharpest weapon in the world, shooting towards Qin Wentian. Winged God Slash. This was a supremely powerful attack of the winged god race. It could penetrate through everything, destroying everything in its path. In an instant, it could destroy Qin Wentian's body. Bzz. An incomparably resplendent light radiated from Qin Wentian, transforming into a supremely powerful sword domain that resembled a heaven-destroying sword formation, enveloping him within. Millions upon millions of swords shot out at the same time as boundless energy in the air transformed into sword intent that gushed forth. However, that figure still continued to slash out, slamming into a resplendent light screen. This light screen contained boundless great Tao energy and was able to block the wing god slash for a moment. When the wing slashed down, Qin Wentian's silhouette had already vanished. Bzz, a beam of light flashed. Qin Wentian felt that even his eyes couldn't keep up with the speed of his opponent. Right now, he only felt a little dizzy as his body felt extremely uncomfortable. It was hard for him to adapt to such an intense battle. His consciousness gradually wavered as he felt his body moving at a terrifying speed, clashing against each other. As for the spectators, they were all dumbfounded. They saw the two of them fighting from the ground to the air, and from the air to the horizons. Beams of intense light unceasingly radiated, making it hard for them to see the movements of the two of them clearly. The speed of their attacks had reached an inconceivable level. Let alone vision, even immortal senses wouldn't be able to capture their movements. The winged god race was proficient in fast attacks and their attacks were unparalleled. They wouldn't stop until they killed their opponents. Do you have any techniques that are compatible with your attribute energy? Your attribute energy isn't suitable for me, but my opponent is perfectly compatible with it. I need some special techniques. A voice directly rang out in Qin Wentian's mind. At this moment, Qin Wentian couldn't care too much. He sent many memories into the consciousness of his opponent. Right now, he already believed that this was a dead man. Since this was just a strand of his will, there was no need to worry about him leaking anything. Let alone the fact that his life was now in the hands of his opponent. His opponent was a heavenly deity, and it was a heavenly deity that was compatible with the descendant of his race. Boom! A terrifying attack blasted into Qin Wentian's body. His body was almost penetrated as a terrifying bloody wound appeared. Qin Wentian was stunned as intense pain radiated from his body. What's going on? He felt his body coming to a halt. He glanced at his body that was on the verge of shattering. He didn't understand what happened earlier. Why was he actually struck by that attack and was almost destroyed? I understand. However, at this moment, a sigh appeared in his mind. It was like an ancient sigh. Careful! Qin Wentian called out in shock. He saw a beam of light shooting over. That heavenly deity naturally wouldn't care about his sigh and directly slashed over. The radiance of the great Tao cascaded downwards as a pair of wings blotted out the sky. After that, the wings transformed into an all-annihilating energy that slashed down from the sky, wanting to shatter Qin Wentian's body. Come! The voice rang out in Qin Wentian's mind once more. After that, he felt his body suffering from a destructive attack. But at this moment, Qin Wentian's body transformed into an incomparably gigantic ancient tree, blotting out the sky and radiating a holy light. The winged god frenziedly slashed down, wanting to cleave Qin Wentian's ancient tree into two. But at this moment, a terrifying attack shot out from Qin Wentian's mind. This was a soul attack that directly penetrated through the wings of the great Tao, enveloping his opponent's tyrannical defense. With a thunderous boom, his opponent was flung through the air. In the next instant, boundless destructive energy directly penetrated through Euphephon's body. Euphephon had a look of terror and despair on his face. Arg! A scream of misery rang out. Euphephon's body directly shattered as blood rained down from the sky. He was directly killed. Qin Wentian felt like he was about to faint. His heart pounded wildly. He succeeded, he killed his opponent. His body rapidly recovered, gradually becoming as good as new, like he had never been injured before. Such recovery speed caused him to involuntarily sigh in admiration. He wouldn't be able to do something like this. How can this be possible? An illusory figure appeared. It was none other than that extremely arrogant heavenly deity. He borrowed the body of his descendant, and although it couldn't be said to be a perfect fusion, he was extremely familiar with it and could unleash immense power. It wasn't something the heavenly deity who borrowed Qin Wentian's body could compare to. But even so, he was actually defeated. An Empyrean from the winged god race wouldn't lose to Qin Wentian. In that case, didn't this mean that the heavenly deity who controlled Yu Fifan's body was defeated by the heavenly deity who controlled Qin Wentian's body? You are someone from Azure Mystic? That heavenly deity turned his gaze to Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian's expression flickered. A voice filled with the vicissitudes of life rang out from his mouth, "Your defeat isn't unjust." He understood his opponent's thoughts, he knew why he was defeated. However, he also knew that his opponent's defeat wasn't unjust. It wasn't his victory, but rather, there was a disparity between the bodies he borrowed. Although Yu Fifan was in existence from the heavenly deity race, his potential was still far inferior to Qin Wentian's. In addition, the ancient prophecy from back then would become reality. His opponent naturally wouldn't be unjust. Why? Could it be that he is stronger than a descendant of my winged god race? The imposing voice of the heavenly deity seemed to be filled with reluctance. So what if you are the overlord of Azure Mystic? Ancient Azure Mystic has long been destroyed, and the heavenly deity race would eventually conquer everything in the supreme ancient immortal realms. When this battlefield reappeared, everything would be turned to dust. Everything that those existences protected would all be turned into nothingness. You still don't understand. You will never understand. The vicissitude voice rang out from Qin Wentian's mouth once more. He then continued, "I once said that Azure Mystic will forever be Azure Mystic. The things you all failed to do in the past, you all will never be able to do it in the future. Now, this battle is the proof of everything. It is also a new beginning. History will never change." Ha ha ha, foolish. Back then, he buried this entire battlefield. Did he think that he would be able to stop the footsteps of the heavenly deity race? He allowed everyone to revive, becoming the living dead of this world. What is he waiting for? Just like what you said, history will never change. Azure Mystic will eventually be destroyed. This is an inevitability of history. An expert from the heavenly deity race spoke with arrogance. He was buried here and hated that person to the bone. He also hated Azure Mystic to the core. He had always been guessing that the reason why the heavenly deity buried Azure Mystic and allowed the dead to revive was because he wanted to borrow the hands of the dead to protect this place. However, would he be able to do so? Now, the supreme ancient immortal realms have already arrived. Time will prove everything. The imperishable Heaven Lord will continue to protect this land. His body, flesh and blood have already fused with this land. He will protect it forever, undying and imperishable. Qin Wentian's voice was incomparably solemn, like the strongest faith in the world. The supreme existence they believed in was none other than the imperishable Heaven Lord, the Heaven Lord who once led them in battle. However, you won't be able to see all of this. Today, you will completely vanish into thin air. Qin Wentian spoke again. A formless terrifying attack blasted through the air, slamming into the illusory figure in the air, causing a thunderous boom to echo out. The other party roared in rage, "I'm unwilling." Boom! A powerful formless energy dissipated, gradually turning into nothingness. The will of a heavenly deity was destroyed, completely vanishing from this world, never to exist again. Countless years have passed, he didn't dissipate because he wanted to see the future of this world. But now, he thought that he would be the one to witness it and obtain a new life through a different method. However, he was wrong. What welcomed him wasn't a new life but destruction. Senior. Right now, Qin Wendian felt extremely weak. His entire person felt like he was about to collapse. This was simply too unbearable. Given his body, he unleashed a power that didn't belong to him. This was an overloading battle. If it wasn't for the fact that his body was extremely sturdy, he would be in danger of collapsing. The other party replied. An illusory figure appeared. This was the will of the heavenly deity leaving Qin Wendian's body. His countenance was filled with the vicissitudes of time. Even after countless years, he was still here. When he looked at Qin Wendian, his gaze was filled with warmth and a smile, as though he was extremely happy. It was like he was looking at his own junior. Finally, you are here. A voice rang out from his mouth, causing Qin Wendian to start. He inclined his head and stared at the heavenly deity as a resplendent light gleamed in his eyes. Chapter 1721. The experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms were still gathered together. They could no longer see the battle between Yufifan and Qin Wendian. The two of them were possessed by heavenly deities, and when they battled, they had already vanished from this place. With regards to the ending of this battle, they had no way to predict. Earlier, in the sky far away, there was an incomparably resplendent radiance, but now, it had vanished. Most probably, this battle between heavenly deities had already ended. Although Qin Wendian was borrowing an Empyrean's body to fight, the might unleashed by the will of a heavenly deity still caused them to be stunned. Yufifan is an expert from the winged god race. If he encounters an elder, he will definitely win and kill his opponent. An expert from the heavenly deity race confidently spoke. They naturally hoped that Yufifan would be victorious. Earlier, from the conversation between the two heavenly deities, they could tell that the supreme ancient heavenly deity and heavenly deity Qingxian both hated each other. Although they were jealous of Yufifan's luck, they still hoped that the supreme ancient heavenly deity would be victorious. This would be beneficial to their future plans. In addition, they didn't want to think that the heavenly deities of the supreme ancient heavenly deity race would be defeated if they borrowed the bodies of their descendants. After all, they were also experts of the heavenly deity race. Let's go. Someone spoke. The miserable scene earlier had already been forgotten by them. Right now, they were filled with anticipation in their hearts, hoping that they would be able to meet their ancestor here as well. Some of the ancestors of the heavenly deity race did indeed come here to wage war against ancient Azure Mystic because they were the most proactive batch of experts from the heavenly deity race. Someone took out a messaging crystal and sent a message to the supreme ancient immortal realms. The news of the appearance of heavenly deities was transmitted to the upper world unceasingly, causing great waves of commotion. If Qin Wendian knew of this, he would surely be even more worried. Most probably, the Azure Mystic immortal realms wouldn't be able to have peace anymore. At this moment, Qin Wendian was still in a state of shock. He stared at the heavenly deity before him. He had finally arrived. Although his talent was extraordinary, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was a supreme genius. But even so, in front of a heavenly deity, a genius at the Empyrean realm was simply too insignificant. A heavenly deity was waiting for him. This sounded simply inconceivable. Not to mention that they clearly didn't know each other, so why were they waiting for him? What do you mean, Senior? Qin Wendian asked. Are you the current master of Azure Mystic? This heavenly deity didn't reply to him. Yes, Senior has already seen those memories. Azure Mystic encountered great chaos, and for the sake of restoring its former peace, I decided to unify the Azure Mystic immortal realms. However, I won't remain in Azure Mystic. In the future, I will still head to the supreme ancient immortal realms for cultivation. If not, my cultivation will encounter a bottleneck and I won't be able to advance any further. Qin Wendian honestly reported. Yes. That heavenly deity nodded. Countless years ago, the supreme ancient immortal realms launched a war against Azure Mystic. Many heavenly deities descended from the sky, wanting to engulf the Azure Mystic immortal realms and take away all the divine depositories, wanting Azure Mystic to submit to them. Those who submit will prosper. Hence, this was the reason why this world-ending war happened. The heavens and earth crumbled, Azure Mystic was razed to flat ground. If it wasn't for the Heaven Lord having heaven-defying methods, I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to see the current Azure Mystic. Great waves rose in Qin Wentian's heart. Although it was just a few words, he could still sense the cruelty of that war. A war that covered an entire world, how terrifying must it be? It was simply hard to imagine how tyrannical those heavenly deities of the supreme ancient immortal realms were, wanting to take away all the divine depositories and make Azure Mystic submit to them. However, most probably, even they themselves didn't expect that they would encounter the things that happened after that. Azure Mystic actually resisted, not willing to submit. I'm telling you all this not because I want you to view the supreme ancient immortal realms with hatred. All lives are like this. When one reaches a supreme position, how can they tolerate the disobedience of others? They naturally want to become stronger, plunder the divine depositories to develop themselves and restrict the development of other powers. To those existences who already stand at the peak, they only want to transcend everything, not allowing anyone to threaten their hegemony. The heavenly deity continued. Qin Wentian nodded slightly. Maybe he didn't feel anything now, but it was different for those characters who stood at the peak. They were already lofty and lofty, how could they allow others to surpass them and replace their positions? Could it be that they weren't worried that they would be conquered by the other party after they were surpassed? The 33 immortal realms were boundlessly vast, but the number of peak powers were still extremely few. All of them hoped to be able to stand at the very peak and not be surpassed by those at the lower levels. Hence, cruel plunder and war was naturally unavoidable. Back then, the imperishable Heaven Lord was conferred the title of Heaven Lord and was a supreme existence in Azure Mystic. However, he had never developed his own power or tried to unify the world. He was only worshipped as the ruler of the world and was the faith of the people of Azure Mystic. That was an incomparably glorious era, or we wouldn't have been able to resist the invasions of the supreme ancient immortal realms. How can such an era be destroyed and become the vassals of others? Azure Mystic doesn't want to be a slave, this has been so since ancient times and it will be the same in the future. Since you are the current Heaven Empyrean of Azure Mystic, you naturally have to protect Azure Mystic from being destroyed. The heavenly deity's obsession was extremely deep. Even after countless years, he still wanted to protect Azure Mystic from being destroyed. Junior will naturally do my best. It's just that if the situation changes and the supreme ancient immortal realms are all gathered here, given how weak Azure Mystic is right now, it's basically impossible for me to reverse the situation alone. Even if the descendants of the heavenly deity race brought the wills of their elders here, it would be extremely tough for us to deal with them. Qin Wentian spoke. AI. That person sighed, I didn't expect that the Azure Mystic today would actually become so weak. What's the situation in the outside world now? Why do I only see Empyreans and not world overlords? After the ancient world-ending battle, Azure Mystic was sealed. There was a mysterious existence that didn't allow outsiders to enter. Now that the seal has been loosened, allowing people from the supreme ancient immortal realms below the world overlord realm to come here. Hence, everything that happened here happened. Qin Wentian replied. He stared at the heavenly deity and asked, Senior, since there's someone who can seal Azure Mystic and threaten the heavenly deity race in the upper world, could it be that the imperishable Heaven Lord hasn't died and is still alive in this world? Impossible. The Heaven Lord has already entered eternal slumber together with Azure Mystic. His flesh and blood have already become a part of this world. That heavenly deity shook his head, sorrow could be seen in his eyes. How magnificent was the Heaven Lord! If he was still alive, how could Azure Mystic end up like this? Then who could it be? Qin Wentian asked. Haven't you met him before? That heavenly deity smiled at Qin Wentian, his words causing a look of puzzlement to appear on Qin Wentian's face. He met him before. You obtained his inheritance, could it be that you don't know about it? Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with a dazzling light. He stared at the figure before him as his heart trembled. Was it really him? That crazy freak was actually the character who protected Azure Mystic. He had always been in this forbidden ground. So it turned out that he had always been guarding the entrance to ancient Azure Mystic. You remember now? That heavenly deity spoke. Qin Wendian nodded. Senior, are you referring to the undying scripture? Yeah, who else in this world would have the undying scripture? Undying and indestructible, this is the cultivation art of the imperishable Heaven Lord. That heavenly deity sighed in admiration. The ancient prophecy has become reality, the sun and moon have changed, the sky of Azure Mystic has changed. From now on, you will inherit the will of the imperishable Heaven Lord and protect Azure Mystic from destruction. Me? Qin Wendian was speechless. This inheritance actually came from the imperishable Heaven Lord? That crazy old freak actually passed down the imperishable Heaven Lord's undying scripture to him just like that? Wasn't this a little too childish? Have you not cultivated the death scripture? That heavenly deity asked again. Qin Wendian shook his head. That old fellow imparted it to a friend of mine. He cultivates the death scripture and is currently in the supreme ancient immortal realms. The eyes of that heavenly deity flashed, feeling somewhat bewildered. After that, he spoke, summon him here. All the zombies in this battlefield will listen to your summons and fight for you. Hence, you won't be fighting alone. Qin Wendian started. The death scripture actually had such a miraculous effect. When he thought of some of Yo Huang's methods in the past, Qin Wendian suddenly understood. He frowned. Senior, her cultivation base is still a little low. She should still be at the peak stage of the immortal Emperor realm. Isn't it a little too dangerous? Since you are here, how can he not come? You are so worried about him. Could it be that he is a woman? That heavenly deity laughed. Qin Wendian nodded. This caused that heavenly deity to start. After that, he laughed. So this is the case. Quickly summon him here. I will help him to break through. There should be many places in this ancient battlefield that are suitable for him to cultivate. Qin Wendian fell silent for a moment before he nodded. Right. As he spoke, he took out his messaging crystal and sent a strand of immortal sense in. Yu Huang, have you received any news about the great changes in Azure Mystic? After the news spread out, Qin Wendian glanced at the heavenly deity before him only to see that the heavenly deity was still smiling at him. The various regions of the supreme ancient immortal realms are circulating this news. The world-ending battle between the supreme ancient immortal realms and Azure Mystic is being mentioned again. The Realm Lord is currently hesitating. Should he summon the World Palace Lords to the lower realms? Princess Kitamura's voice rang out in Qin Wendian's mind. Qin Wendian could understand the lifelong Realm Lord's hesitation. Given the current situation, the overlord of a world realm was no longer a major character. The people sent here might become cannon fodder. This change has something to do with us. Someone hopes that you can make a trip here. Qin Wendian spoke. Princess Kitamura fell silent for a moment before she asked, does it have something to do with us? Yes, the entrance to the ancient battlefield is located in the forbidden ground of the Dark North Immortal Mountain. Back then, that madman in the forbidden ground actually has a connection with the imperishable Heaven Lord of ancient Azure Mystic. The power he imparted to us might very well be the work of the imperishable Heaven Lord. There are many zombies in this ancient battlefield and I met an ancient will here. He told me that if you come here, you will be able to control these zombies and they will fight for you. Qin Wendian spoke. He then continued, however, you have to consider the details yourself. The other side fell silent again. A moment later, a voice rang out, I will do my best. Good. Qin Wendian nodded and kept his messaging crystal. The Heaven Empyrean glanced at Qin Wendian and spoke again, since you are the Heaven Empyrean in Azure Mystic, you must have many loyal immortal Emperor subordinates, right? Bring them here and do your best to raise their cultivation bases. In the future, they will follow you in your conquest. Chapter 1722. Qin Wendian's eyes gleamed with sharpness when he heard the heavenly deity's words. Qin Wendian wanted him to gather the generals of Azure Mystic. His subordinates and good friends were all people of Azure Mystic. If their strength could transform, they would definitely be able to protect Azure Mystic in the future. Qin Wendian sent his immortal sense into his messaging crystal, telling everyone to gather at the royal palace of the former Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. As his command was given out, the peak experts of the various palaces in Heaven Empyrean City all moved out. Changqing the Great, the Southern Phoenix Matriarch, the Dark North Immortal Emperor, the Jadestige Palace Mistress, the Battle Saint Tribe, the Myriad Devil Islands, all of them moved out together, directly using teleportation arrays to arrive at the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. Right now, the 4 locations of Azure Mystic were all connected by teleportation arrays and the Heaven Empyrean Palace was the hub. Now that Azure Mystic was unified, the Heaven Empyrean Palace naturally had to take on the role of connecting the entire Azure Mystic. With a single command, everyone would be able to gather at a location in the shortest amount of time. After Qin Wendian was conferred the title of Heaven Empyrean, this was the first time he gave an order. Everyone naturally didn't hesitate and immediately executed it. At the royal palace of the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom, more and more experts were rushing there, arriving in the shortest amount of time. After giving the command, Qin Wendian stared at the ancient heavenly deity and asked, "Senior, I've already given the command. Very soon, everyone will appear outside the forbidden ground. It's just that in order to prevent any accidents, I need to bring them in first. If not, even an Empyrean from the supreme ancient immortal realms would be able to control them." That's only natural. The ancient heavenly deity nodded. Then what about the experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms? Qin Wendian asked. Don't worry, this is ancient Azure Mystic. Although there are good fortune everywhere, how much can they obtain? This world is boundlessly vast. Even if there are good fortune, it wouldn't be so easy to obtain it. In addition, if they really encountered good fortune, I'm afraid an internal war would already erupt. The ancient heavenly deity calmly spoke. Qin Wendian nodded, he agreed. If there really was a heaven-defying good fortune, the divine depositories left behind by a heavenly deity were discovered, the experts from the heavenly deity race would surely start a war. Who would allow the other party to obtain the divine depositories? They all wanted to take it for themselves. I'll go out with you. I'll borrow your body for a bit. I'm going to carve a formation out. Qin Wendian nodded. A moment later, his will transformed into a beam of light that directly entered the center of Qin Wendian's brows. Within Qin Wendian's sea of consciousness, his will once again fused together with Qin Wendian's will. There was only one entrance to this forbidden ground. Qin Wendian himself had no way to exit. Only to see Qin Wendian inscribing a formation beneath his feet. An incomparably resplendent light flashed as astral runic inscriptions illuminated the area, drawing upon the power of the dark constellations in the sky. In an instant, the 9 constellations surrounding the black sun shone with a resplendent light, enveloping the formation he was inscribing. The black constellation seemed to merge together as a beam of black light cascaded down from the sky, shining onto the formation. Qin Wendian stepped into it, and the formation was activated as his silhouette directly vanished from his original location. When Qin Wendian appeared again, he was at the entrance of ancient Azure Mystic. There were many experts gathered here, and when they saw Qin Wendian suddenly appearing, their eyes flashed with a strange light. "We pay our respects to the Heaven Empyrean." Someone bowed, recognizing Qin Wendian. He was someone from Azure Mystic. There were also Empyreans whose eyes gleamed sharply as they asked, "Sir, where did you come from?" Qin Wendian suddenly appeared, transforming into a beam of light. It was extremely mystical, like he just came out from a forbidden ground. Qin Wendian calmly glanced at that person and didn't bother with him. His silhouette flashed as he directly soared through the air, vanishing from sight. A moment later, a look of contemplation appeared on the face of that person who asked. Not long after, Qin Wendian arrived at the royal palace of the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. When he arrived, there were already many people here. Changqing the Great, Qing'er and the others were all here, as well as Little Rascal, Purgatory, Jun Mengchen, and the others. "Senior brother, what happened exactly?" Jun Mengchen curiously asked. Beside him, his senior brother and Bai Wuya were also here. Meng Chen, there's a huge change in Azure Mystic. Something major happened. After everyone is here, I will inform everyone about this. Qin Wendian spoke. After he came out, the will of that ancient heavenly deity was already in a deep slumber. It didn't affect him at all. Right. Jun Mengchen nodded, but he felt an itch in his heart. He was very curious. Before this, Qin Wendian ordered the people of Azure Mystic to pay attention to the movements of the immortal realms. Countless mysterious experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms, including ancient emperors, were gathering here from the immortal realms. However, these people didn't know much about this and had no idea what was going on. Now that Qin Wendian has gathered them, he must have already investigated everything clearly. GD, Emperor Yu, and the others arrived one after another. The experts from the myriad Devil Islands also arrived. Bai Qing walked to the side of Qin Wendian and spoke in a low voice, Wendian Gij. Little lass Qing, you are here too. Qin Wendian rubbed Bai Qing's head. Emicham, I want to share some of Wendian Gij's worries. Bai Qing replied. Okay. Qin Wendian laughed. This lass was already an immortal emperor of an immortal realm, but he always felt that she was just a little girl. When all the experts gathered here, Qin Wendian walked to the front of everyone and spoke, recently, Azure Mystic hasn't been peaceful. I'm sure everyone has heard of this. Before this, I told everyone to investigate the situation in Azure Mystic. Now, everything is clear. Not long ago, I learned of some secrets about Azure Mystic. So it turns out that the Azure Mystic we live in isn't ancient Azure Mystic. The Azure Mystic of the past was countless times vaster and stronger than this. Experts were as common as clouds, above ancient emperors were world overlords, and above world overlords were heavenly deities. The eyes of everyone gleamed with sharpness. World overlords, heavenly deities, they have never heard of this before. All of them were seriously listening. Ancient Azure Mystic already had the strength of heavenly deities, standing at the peak of Azure Mystic. However, some powers in the supreme ancient immortal realms wanted to seize Azure Mystic for themselves and plunder the divine depositories, wanting Azure Mystic to submit to them. However, they were rejected. Hence, the heavenly deities of the supreme ancient immortal realms descended from the heavens and initiated a world-ending battle. In that battle, Azure Mystic was razed to flat ground. The supreme character of ancient Azure Mystic, the imperishable Heaven Lord, killed the heavenly deities who came from the supreme ancient immortal realms. After the world collapsed, the imperishable Heaven Lord used a heaven-defying method to bury ancient Azure Mystic. The entrance was located in the forbidden ground of the Dark North Immortal Mountain. Now that it has reappeared, the experts of the supreme ancient immortal realms came here precisely because of this. Qin Wendian used an extremely short amount of words to briefly explain the situation. After everyone heard it, they all felt their hearts surging with emotions. Ancient Azure Mystic, divine depositories, heavenly deities, world-ending battle. All these things that seemed extremely distant to them actually happened right before their eyes. The world they lived in was actually not the true Azure Mystic immortal realms. In the forbidden ground, I encountered a heavenly deity from ancient Azure Mystic. He has already died, but his will still exists in this world. He hopes that I can inherit the imperishable Heaven Lord's dying will and protect the Azure Mystic immortal realms. If all the experts from the supreme ancient immortal realms gather here, this world would most probably cease to exist. We can only be enslaved by those lofty powers. Hence, I agreed to his words. Everyone here are my close relatives, friends, or even seniors. Are all of you willing to follow me? Qin Wendian asked. Senior brother, I will naturally follow you. Jun Mengchen spoke. Qing Er and Changqing the Great didn't say anything. There was basically no need for them to express their stance. Bai Qing stood beside Qin Wendian, not saying anything. Heaven Empyrean, now that you are the overlord of Azure Mystic, we will naturally follow you. The king of the Shooting Sun Kingdom spoke. Among everyone here, his relationship with Qin Wentian was the weakest. When it was time for him to express his stance, he naturally had to do so. If you all choose this path, you might encounter life and death dangers. When facing the supreme existences of the supreme ancient immortal realms, even I might not have a way to stop them. Although I'm the Heaven Empyrean, I don't dare to treat all of you as my subordinates. I respect your choices and will definitely not force you. But if you all choose to follow me on this path, there's no need to talk about turning back. Qin Wentian seriously spoke. Everyone naturally believed in Qin Wentian's character. Since he said this, even if they chose to back out, Qin Wentian wouldn't say anything. Danger has always coexisted with opportunity. Many of them have cultivated for countless years and personally witnessed the growth of a junior like Qin Wentian. Right now, ancient Azure Mystic has appeared. To them, wasn't this an opportunity as well? They had to follow Qin Wentian all the way until the end. Everyone respectively expressed their willingness to follow Qin Wentian. They understood that from now onwards, they would be on the same side as Qin Wentian. They wouldn't dare to disobey or betray him. Alright. For the next period of time, everyone can rest in the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. I still have to wait for someone. Qin Wentian spoke. On the way here, he had already received a message from Princess Kitamura. The lifelong Realm Lord ultimately couldn't endure it any longer and sent 4 World Palace Lords to Azure Mystic. She was someone from Azure Mystic and took the initiative to tell the lifelong Realm Lord that the Forbidden Grounds were unlocked. The lifelong Realm Lord agreed to let her go, and not long after, Princess Kitamura would return to Azure Mystic. Many people were curious. Who was the person Qin Wentian was waiting for? Everyone, there's no need to guess. Many of you should have heard of the person I'm waiting for. Dark North Immortal Emperor, you are all extremely familiar with her. She's your daughter, Princess Kitamura. Qin Wentian spoke. A dazzling light flashed in the eyes of the Dark North Immortal Emperor. Was Yu Huang about to return? Seems like the relationship between Qin Wentian and his daughter, Princess Kitamura, might be even better than he had imagined. He felt some joy in his heart. With Yu Huang's relationship, Qin Wentian would definitely take care of him even more. As for the beautiful palace mistress of the Jadestage Immortal Palace and some others, they all cast envious glances at the Dark North Immortal Emperor. Seems like their relationship wasn't ordinary. Could it be that the Dark North Immortal Emperor was also the father-in-law of the Heaven Empyrean? Naturally, they could only think about this in their hearts. They didn't dare to say it out loud. The experts from the Supreme Ancient Immortal Realms continued to venture deeper into ancient Azure Mystic. The people from the outside world also continued to enter. Experts from the upper world also kept on arriving until one day, the 4 World Palace Lords of the Lifelong Realm brought many immortal emperors here. Princess Kitamura was among them, guiding them towards the direction of the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom. Chapter 1723. Although the Hokage Sengoku Kingdom has already moved to Heaven Empyrean City, the royal palace here was still maintained and there was a prince in charge of this place. In the old royal palace, Princess Kitamura returned. When she saw everything before her, she actually felt as though a lifetime had passed. Back then, she and Qin Wentian were sent to the Supreme Ancient Immortal Realms by the crazy old freak. In the blink of an eye, several hundred years had passed. To her, this period of time was simply too long. In addition to her experiences in the Supreme Ancient Immortal Realms, she felt as though the blue sea had turned into mulberry fields. She turned her gaze ahead only to see Qin Wentian personally leading a group of people to welcome them. Her father, the Dark North Immortal Emperor, was here as well as her younger sister, Baiming Nongyue. She naturally saw the smile in Qin Wentian's eyes, as well as the white-haired beauty beside him. It was none other than the princess of the Evergreen Kingdom. Qin Wentian has already told her that he got married in Azure Mystic and she also congratulated him. Qin Wentian also glanced at Princess Kitamura. The 4 World Palace Lords of the Lifelong Realm were here. In addition to him, the Lifeire Palace Lord, there were over half of the Lifelong Realm's forces here in Azure Mystic. Other than this, there were also many immortal emperors accompanying the four world palace lords. Clearly, the lifelong realm lord knew about the situation in the forbidden grounds in the lower world and had sent a very powerful force here. At the very least, this was so in the lifelong realm. But in the perspective of the supreme ancient immortal realms, it naturally couldn't be considered much. The lifelong realm lord also wanted to obtain good fortune. Sadly, he didn't dare to enter. Most probably, there were many world overlords in the upper world who were worried. The four world palace lords were Sky Air Palace Lord, Xianyuan Palace Lord, Dragon Saddle Palace Lord, and Kungbutter Palace Lord. It was very normal for the Sky Air Palace Lord to come. He was the personal disciple of the lifelong realm lord and to a certain extent, represented the lifelong realm lord. He naturally had to come here to monitor the situation here. After all, if there really was good fortune, let alone a subordinate, even a personal disciple might not be reliable. But no matter what, he was the most trustworthy person here. As for the strongest desolate heaven Empyrean, he didn't come. Most probably, the lifelong realm lord was worried that the desolate heaven Empyrean would be too domineering. Even his personal disciples might not be able to suppress him. The Xianyuan Palace and Dragon Saddle Palace's palace lords were both relatively loyal. Back then, the two palace lords followed him to conquer the world of immortals. Yu Huang. The Dark North Immortal Emperor stepped out, staring at his daughter. Father. Princess Kitamura called out. The Dark North Heavenly Emperor nodded with a smile. Now, your cultivation base is the same as mine. Ha! Like father, like daughter. Baiming Nongyue walked up and smiled. Elder sis, seems like you are doing very well in the supreme ancient immortal realms. Princess Kitamura smiled, she didn't say anything. Was she doing well in the supreme ancient immortal realms? There were simply too many experts in the supreme ancient immortal realms. An immortal emperor was like a speck of sand in the Ganges River, simply too insignificant. This was especially so during the period when they first entered the supreme ancient immortal realms. How tough was it? Just a city lord of a small city almost caused them to be consigned to eternal damnation. Luckily, Qin Wentian's growth was extremely fast. Right now, he could be considered to have stabilized his footing in the supreme ancient immortal realms, becoming a marquis of an area and managing a palace. I haven't congratulated you yet, junior brother. Princess Kitamura smiled and called out. She didn't refer to Qin Wentian as junior brother, because she had the four palace lords behind her. Also, in the supreme ancient immortal realms, she had always been Qin Wentian's senior apprentice sister. Everyone knew this, even the lifelong realm lord also felt this way. If the lifelong realm lord found out that they weren't fellow apprentice siblings, what would he think? Before this, Qin Wentian had already told everyone that he didn't want the realm lord to know about this. However, his considerations were different from Baiming Youhuang's. Right now, the lifelong realm lord misunderstood that they were all disciples of ancient Emperor Yi. This identity had its pros and cons as well. If they were to expose it now, things would be troublesome instead. It's truly regretful that you didn't come personally. Qin Wentian naturally understood that the lifelong realm lord was referring to the wedding. It's truly regretful. Baiming Youhuang, the day of the Heaven Empyrean's wedding can be said to be extremely grand. The entire world will send their congratulations. The Dark North Immortal Emperor laughed. Princess Kitamura's eyes flashed as she stared at Qin Wentian. She then asked in a low voice, Heaven Empyrean? Elder sister, don't you know? Right now, that fellow is already the overlord of Azure Mystic. He has the title of Heaven Empyrean and is worshipped by everyone in the world. Baiming Nongyue laughed. Qin Wentian bitterly smiled and shook his head. Heaven Empyrean sounded very tyrannical, but in the supreme ancient immortal realms, this title didn't count for much. Only the imperishable Heaven Lord could truly dominate the supreme ancient immortal realms. Strength was everything. Alright, Lifeire Empyrean, tell us about the situation here. The Sky Air Empyrean walked over and asked. They came here for the ancient battlefield, they weren't here to listen to Qin Wentian and the others chat. He didn't refer to Qin Wentian as Palace Lord Qin and directly referred to him as the Liefire Empyrean. Naturally, there was a sense of distance between them. Back then at the lifelong banquet, they had once seen Qin Wentian's performance when he was an immortal emperor. At that time, he represented the Liefire Palace and defeated the immortal emperors of the 9 world palaces. Right now, the immortal emperor of the past was already on the same level as them. There's nothing much. The entrance to the ancient battlefield has already opened and I have no idea about the situation inside. I will lead all of you in later. Qin Wentian spoke. Let's go then. The Sky Air Empyrean spoke again. Qin Wentian glanced at him. He could naturally sense the arrogance of this personal disciple of the lifelong Realm Lord. He smiled and nodded, right. Since this is the case, let's move out then. Let's go. He glanced at Princess Kitamura. She nodded her head and after that, the group of them once again moved towards the forbidden ground. When they arrived at the entrance of the ancient battlefield, there were still people entering unceasingly. Qin Wentian and the others didn't hesitate and entered. They once again arrived at the ancient battlefield. The black sun in the sky exuded an intense pressure. The eyes of the palace lords gleamed with sharpness as they stared at the sun and the 9 gigantic constellations in the sky. They were speechless for a long time. With regards to the rumors about ancient Azure Mystic, their hearts were filled with reverence. And now, they had arrived at the ancient land, the ancient battlefield of destruction. Do you really know nothing about this place? The Sky Air Empyrean stared at Qin Wentian, his eyes were as sharp as ever, as though he wanted to see through Qin Wentian's words clearly. I only know that there are already many experts here, including many from the heavenly deity race. Qin Wentian replied, coldly laughing in his heart. Most probably, the Sky Air Empyrean still didn't know that his trip here was fraught with grim possibilities. Leaving aside how dangerous this place was, just the exit alone would be extremely difficult to find. No one in the supreme ancient immortal realms would be able to inscribe a teleportation formation like that ancient heavenly deity, unless they found another exit. Even existences from the heavenly deity race were surrounded by danger, let alone these 4 palace lords. Although he didn't rejoice in their misfortune, he wouldn't sympathize with them either. All of these were his own choices. Back then when he followed the other experts here, he also knew nothing about this place. Danger lurked everywhere. If the heavenly deity from the winged god race was the one who won that battle, he would already be a dead man. Palace Lord Qin, since everyone knows nothing, let's form a group and explore this forbidden ground together. The Xianyuan Palace Lord spoke. He didn't mind being closer to Qin Wentian. His juniors were on good terms with the vice-governor of the Liefire Palace, Di Tian. Also, regardless of Qin Wentian or Di Tian, both of them were people with great potential. It wouldn't be a problem for him to be closer to them. It's fine, I wish to explore this forbidden ground alone. Everyone, please do as you wish. Qin Wentian felt that it would be too inconvenient if he were to travel together with these people. The eyes of the Xianyuan Palace Lord flashed. After that, he smiled and nodded, sure. Since the Liefire Empyrean wishes to travel alone, let's go with him then. The Sky Air Empyrean spoke. He had received the order from his master to adopt a laissez-faire attitude towards Qin Wentian. But no matter what, he also knew from his master that Qin Wentian was Yi's disciple. Yu Huang, let's go. The Sky Air Empyrean glanced at Princess Kitamura who didn't move. Princess Kitamura's beautiful eyes flashed. She spoke in a light voice, I will naturally follow my father. She naturally wouldn't say that she would follow Qin Wentian. It was only natural for her to follow her father. Very simple. Just let your father follow us. The Sky Air Empyrean spoke. This caused Qin Wentian to frown. Why did he feel that the Sky Air Empyrean had no intention of letting Yu Huang go? The Dark North Immortal Emperor is someone of my Azure Mystic, he will naturally follow me. Since my senior sister wants to follow my father, it's the same if she follows me. At this moment, Qin Wendian spoke. There was no problem with his words because he didn't know what Yu Huang had promised the lifelong Realm Lord. However, the Sky Air Empyrean naturally knew. Also, before he descended to the lower world, he had already received instructions from his master. The woman his master had already decided on would be announced during the next grand banquet. How could she follow Qin Wendian? Even if they were fellow apprentice sisters, they should at least have some reservations. It wasn't good to be too close. No way. The Sky Air Empyrean decisively rejected. This is my master's intention. I will protect Princess Kitamura. I won't feel at ease leaving her to you. Qin Wendian's frown grew deeper. He stared at the Sky Air Empyrean. My senior sister will follow me and her father. What are you worried about? You want to defy orders? The Sky Air Empyrean couldn't be bothered to continue speaking nonsense after seeing Qin Wendian rebutting him so many times. His eyes gleamed with sharpness as a faint pressure gushed forth, enveloping Qin Wendian. Qin Wendian merely killed the Li-Fire Empyrean and he even joined forces with Di Tian. Yet, he actually dared to speak to him in such a manner. Seems like that battle earlier had caused his confidence to inflate. Qin Wendian's expression turned cold when he saw the Sky Air Empyrean using the lifelong Realm Lord's words. He calmly spoke, Realm Lord, why are you worried about me? I can personally seek guidance from you. His words were clearly a challenge to the Sky Air Empyrean. Although he didn't say that he was defying orders, he wouldn't compromise either. For a period of time, the atmosphere was extremely tense. The Xianyuan Palace Lord and the other two Palace Lords were all stunned when they saw this. They just entered the ancient battlefield and a civil war was already about to erupt? They didn't understand. Why were the Sky Air Empyrean and this new Li-Fire Empyrean so resolute in their attitude? Chapter 1724. The Sky Air Palace Lord didn't expect Qin Wendian to be so domineering in front of him. A newly appointed Li-Fire Empyrean actually dared to disregard his status as the Sky Air Palace Lord. Don't forget, other than being a Palace Lord, he was also the personal disciple of the lifelong Realm Lord and was heavily injured. The lifelong Realm Lord's trust in him surpassed the other 8 World Palace Lords. If there's a need to report this to my master, I will do so personally. How can it be your turn to seek guidance from me and disturb my master? There's no room for discussion on this matter. My attitude is the will of my master. You have to obey. The Sky Air Palace Lord could sense the domineering aura from Qin Wendian. His tone grew even more unyielding. He didn't mind if Qin Wendian wanted to leave alone. But since Qin Wendian dared to act so domineeringly before him, he could only act even more domineeringly. The two of you are both working for the Realm Lord. Why must you act in such a manner? Why don't we travel together? There's no need to make things difficult then. The Xianyuan Palace Lord laughed. He was also an extremely imposing character. When he laughed, the tense atmosphere was broken. He glanced at Qin Wendian. As long as Qin Wendian nodded his head, this little conflict could be temporarily resolved. There was no need to be so hostile. However, the Xianyuan Palace Lord had clearly misjudged Qin Wendian. Leaving aside the fact that he had something important to do now, even if it was during normal times, he wouldn't compromise. I don't have the leisure to travel together with him. Qin Wendian decisively rejected, his tone extremely impolite. Since the Sky Air Palace Lord has already said things like this, there was no need for him to feign civility. His words were direct, causing the Xianyuan Palace Lord to be stunned as he stared at Qin Wendian in astonishment. Qin Wendian really didn't give him face. He personally stood up to be the peacemaker to ease the stiff atmosphere, but the other party refused so directly. Although the Empyreans of the 9 world palaces were of the same level, there was still a hierarchy between them. Qin Wendian was the Li-Fire Empyrean. The Desolate Heaven Palace, Sky Air Palace and Xianyuan Palace were all at the peak. The Li-Fire, Genmetal and Kungvutter World Palaces were at the very bottom. Qin Wendian has already stepped out to speak. This meant that there were 2 powerful World Palace Lords. Yet, Qin Wendian still acted like this? He was simply stirring up trouble. How arrogant. Palace Master Kanshue seemed to wish for the world to be in chaos. His tone was slightly cold. Everyone has heard it. It's not that I don't want to give him face, but I'm openly going against the Realm Lord's orders. What do you all think? The tone of the Sky Air Palace Lord was filled with coldness. The eyes of the immortal emperors behind him all gleamed with sharpness. Were they planning to act against Qin Wendian? Palace Lord Qin, don't make things difficult for everyone. The Dragon Saddle Empyrean also spoke at this moment. He naturally stood on the side of the Sky Air Palace Lord. Regardless of strength or status, this new Lifeire Empyrean couldn't be compared to the Sky Air Palace Lord. He naturally understood whose side he should stand on at this moment. In addition, the Sky Air Palace Lord was acting on behalf of the lifelong Realm Lord. Even if he didn't, the Realm Lord would still help this personal disciple of his lie. Hence, there was no need to consider who was in the wrong. Qin Wendian was definitely in the wrong. Because, the person standing before him was the personal disciple of the lifelong Realm Lord. Let's leave. Qin Wendian spoke to Princess Kitamura behind him. There was no room for compromise in this matter. Even if the four palace lords forced him, it was impossible. Also, the other party clearly wouldn't agree to it. In that case, there was no need to say anything more, he directly prepared to leave. I want to see how you are going to leave. The Sky Air Palace Lord coldly spoke. Princess Kitamura, you should know what to do, right? Princess Kitamura was in a difficult position right now. She promised the lifelong Realm Lord that Qin Wendian had no idea about it. If because of this matter, the lifelong Realm Lord might have ill intentions towards Qin Wendian. This was something she absolutely didn't want to see. However, Qin Wendian told her to come down to the lower Realm Lord and said that this was an extremely important matter. Hence, she was clearly hesitating. The people behind Qin Wendian finally understood. So it turned out that Qin Wendian and these people were all under the same Realm Lord. However, they didn't seem to get along well with each other. This was especially so for the Sky Air Palace Lord. His gaze was filled with coldness when he stared at Qin Wendian, filled with disdain. But for such a matter, immortal emperors like them didn't even have the qualifications to interfere. They could only hand this matter to Qin Wendian to handle, or they would only create more trouble. After all, these people were all Empyreans, none of them could afford to antagonize them. I really hate your tone. Qin Wendian turned and stared at the Sky Air Palace Lord, his tone turning cold. The eyes of the Sky Air Palace Lord grew sharper, like a sharp sword piercing into Qin Wendian's eyes. So what of it? You guys retreat. Qin Wendian spoke to the people behind him. After that, the crowd retreated. Princess Kitamura stared at Qin Wendian with some worry, but she still followed the others and retreated, staying very far away. When the Sky Air Palace Lord saw that Qin Wendian actually wanted to act against him, his gaze was no longer cold, it was filled with killing intent. With a wave of his hand, the experts behind him all retreated, leaving behind only the 5 Empyreans from the 9 world palaces. Yu Huang is my senior apprentice sister. In addition, her father will be with me. Even if we travel together, we are actually obstructed. Qin Wendian laughed. I have to bring her away no matter what. For those who want to obstruct me, I can only ask for guidance from you. Arrogant. The Xianyuan Palace Lord berated. I initially thought that you are a character with outstanding talent. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant and conceited. The Xianyuan Palace Lord stared at Qin Wendian as he spoke. Wanting to ask for guidance from them? The Kungbutter Palace Lord might be weaker, but the Sky Air Palace Lord still had him. Qin Wendian wanted to challenge them. Even the Dragon Saddle Palace Lord wasn't someone Qin Wendian could shake, right? Qin Wendian actually wanted to deal with the 4 Empyreans? This was simply arrogance to the point of ignorance. Everyone should have seen it. The Sky Air Palace Lord stared at them. Since this is the case, I will accept the Lifeire Empyrean's guidance. Qin Wentian directly soared up into the air. The Sky Air Palace Lord's entire person was like a beam of resplendent sword light, instantly appearing before Qin Wentian. Terrifying sword might gushed forth from him. The sword light was like a supremely powerful formation of the great Tao. The aura radiating from it caused the hearts of everyone to tremble. "Are you ready?" the Sky Air Palace Lord asked. "Make your move." Qin Wentian's white robes fluttered in the wind. With a single thought, he didn't even need to accumulate energy. As the sound of his voice faded, the body of the Sky Air Palace Lord transformed into a series of afterimages. The people below didn't even see him move, they only discovered that he had already vanished. In the next instant, they only saw a supremely powerful sword domain erupting forth from Qin Wentian. Beams of illusory sword light shot down from the heavens, transforming into a sword art of the great Tao that slashed apart this space. The sword scars around Qin Wentian completely locked down this space. He could only endure this attack, there was no other way. In just an instant, the hearts of everyone pounded rapidly as they stared nervously at the sky. Even their breathing seemed to have halted. With just a single strike, that incomparably resplendent sword scar of the great Tao destroyed everything. It was like an unblockable killing technique. With a single thought, only Empyreans would be able to unleash such an attack. If one wasn't an Empyrean, it was impossible for them to unleash such a powerful attack. The three palace lords watched from the side, coldly laughing in their hearts when they saw this scene. The Sky Air Palace Lord's skyline sword art contained boundless might. Any palace lord from the 9 world palaces would find it extremely troublesome to fight against him. Even the Xianyuan Palace Lord would have to expend a great deal of effort to defend against his skyline sword art. Qin Wentian, as the new Lifeire Empyrean, shouldn't have been so arrogant. Qin Wentian roared, chanting in Sanskrit. In an instant, Buddhic light flashed in the sky as his illusory law body suddenly appeared. Terrifying Buddhic light radiated from him as tens of thousands of ancient characters transformed into a screen of Buddhic light, fusing together as one. The sword scar slashed down, slicing apart the Buddhic light screen. However, the might of the sword scar was no longer a threat to Qin Wentian. But at this moment, Qin Wentian saw a sword scar directly penetrating through everything, aiming at the center of his brows, wanting to kill him in a single strike. Puchi. This beam of sword light directly penetrated through Qin Wentian's body, piercing into his forehead. The sword might instantly erupted forth, wanting to tear apart the void. However, within the void, there seemed to be a pair of cold eyes staring at him. Illusion. The Sky Air Palace Lord instantly reacted, breaking free from the illusion. Sword scars of the great Tao appeared, manifesting a spatial tempest. Sword scars crisscrossed the area, lacerating everything, tearing apart Qin Wentian's silhouette once again as fresh blood flowed from his wounds. Abruptly, an intense sense of danger gushed forth. He only felt a towering sword will as a bone-piercing coldness permeated his entire body. A sword directly left a bloody wound on his neck before vanishing. Naturally, Qin Wentian wasn't killed. He retreated as the sword intent in his hand dissipated. He coldly stared at the Sky Air Palace Lord. A trace of blood could be seen on the neck of the Sky Air Palace Lord. If he had been willing earlier, the Sky Air Palace Lord's head would have been separated from his body. In an instant, the Sky Air Palace Lord felt a chill from head to toe. But how could this be possible? How did Qin Wentian do this? He touched his throat and glanced at his finger. There was fresh blood on it as his countenance turned pale. The other 3 palace lords were all stunned when they saw this scene. They simply couldn't believe what they saw. How could this be? Evidently, they didn't want to believe that Qin Wentian was actually so powerful. What sort of character was the Sky Air Palace Lord? Even if this was an illusion, he shouldn't have died. If I wanted to kill you, you would already be dead. Qin Wentian's voice drifted over at this moment, filled with coldness. Truly coldness, causing the Sky Air Palace Lord to feel a chill down his spine. Chapter 1725. The Sky Air Palace Lord understood that Qin Wentian's words were naturally true. The sword wound on his neck was still there. Earlier, he had already taken a stroll in front of the god of death. Qin Wentian was arrogant and conceited. Who was the arrogant one exactly? As the personal disciple of the lifelong Realm Lord, the Sky Air Palace Lord, one of the 3 strongest palace lords in the 9 world palaces, he actually couldn't even withstand a single strike from Qin Wentian. Not only was the Sky Air Palace Lord speechless, the Xianyuan Palace Lord, Dragon Saddle Palace Lord and Kungbutter Palace Lord were all staring at the wound on the Sky Air Palace Lord's neck, unable to speak for a long time. The Xianyuan Palace Lord's expression was extremely unsightly to behold. Earlier, he was still mocking Qin Wentian. Now, his face was directly smacked. Qin Wentian used his strength to tell them that it didn't matter how long one cultivated or how famous one was. He had just broken through to the Empyrean realm and was able to kill the Life-Fire Empyrean back then. Now, he could similarly defeat them or even kill them. However, Qin Wentian didn't kill him. After all, the Sky Air Palace Lord was the personal disciple of the lifelong Realm Lord. If Qin Wentian killed him, there was no need for him to return to the lifelong realm. Yi Qianyu and the others were still in the Life-Fire Palace. Hence, it was impossible for him to kill the Sky Air Palace Lord. However, this strike was enough to make the Sky Air Palace Lord unable to forget it for the rest of his life. Who else has any objections? Qin Wentian glanced at the 4 palace lords. At this moment, his voice no longer sounded arrogant in the ears of everyone. It was filled with imposingness and self-confidence. Such a powerful aura involuntarily gushed forth. This was might, the might that belonged to experts. Only with strength would people view you in a different light. If you weren't strong enough, you would be arrogant. If you were strong enough, you would be imposing. At this moment, the 4 palace lords all fell silent. If they continued to speak, if Qin Wentian invited them to spar, how should they respond? Should they let Qin Wentian leave a wound on their necks? They didn't feel that they had the strength to win against the Sky Air Palace Lord. What illusion technique did you use? The Sky Air Palace Lord asked with some reluctance. He wanted to understand why the second scene was still an illusion. Also, he had clearly seen through Qin Wentian's illusions and could clearly smell the scent of blood. There was no way he would be wrong. The Sky Air Palace Lord asked with a hint of reluctance. Qin Wentian coldly glanced at him. He had comprehended the origin of illusionary laws and could use illusionary arts with a single thought. Powerful illusionary arts could not only deceive the eyes, they could also deceive the senses of smell, immortal sense, and perception. The illusionary arts he cultivated were all obtained from the tiny astral being. After the unification of Azure Mystic, he taught the immortal emperors in the Heaven Empyrean Palace. During his free time, he cultivated this art and gradually became more proficient in it. This illusionary art was named Mirrored Flowers, Water Moon. The flower in the mirror and the moon in the water were both unfathomable and illusory. There were a total of 3 levels to illusionary arts. The Sky Air Palace Lord wasn't strong enough and could only see through the first level. Although he saw through the second level, it was already too late and he had already fallen for it. Even if he could see through the second level, there was still the third level. This was precisely the reason why illusionary arts were so terrifying. When someone saw through your illusionary arts, they would definitely lower their guard. Hence, the second level of illusionary arts arrived. And when you even saw through the second level and were feeling complacent, the third level would descend upon you. This type of illusionary art was simply too fatal. The Sky Air Palace Lord had never fought against Qin Wentian before and had seen such illusionary arts before. He naturally fell for it. Qin Wentian naturally wouldn't tell the Sky Air Palace Lord that the innate techniques of stellar martial cultivators were extremely useful in battle. How could he tell an enemy? Was it Yi who imparted it to you? The Sky Air Palace Lord transmitted his voiceover, his expression unsightly to behold. Yi was also a world overlord character, comparable to his master, the lifelong Realm Lord. He thought that Yi had imparted a powerful innate technique to Qin Wentian, which was why he was defeated. As for other aspects of combat prowess, he didn't feel that he would be weaker than Qin Wentian. He wasn't willing to admit it. You can go and complain to the Realm Lord first. Just say that I wanted to bring my senior sister along with me but you obstructed me and was defeated by me with a single sword strike. If you don't explain things clearly, I will convey the Realm Lord's words to you in the future. Qin Wentian still didn't reply to the Sky Air Palace Lord's question. He continued to speak, his words causing the Sky Air Palace Lord to turn ashen. He was the personal disciple of the lifelong Realm Lord while Qin Wentian was Yi's personal disciple. What would his master think if he learned of this? Not only did he throw away his own face, he also threw away the face of the lifelong Realm Lord. Hence, he had to hide this matter as much as he could. If his master's face wasn't good, he would surely be disappointed in him and distance himself from him. Qin Wentian's silhouette flashed, directly vanishing from his original location. He appeared beside Qing, and the others as he spoke in a low voice, "Let's go." Princess Kitamura cast a deep glance at Qin Wentian. She also didn't expect that Qin Wentian was already so powerful. She was very clear about what sort of character the Sky Air Palace Lord was, but he was actually defeated so easily, leaving behind a bloody wound. Qin Wentian could even kill the Sky Air Palace Lord on the spot. If the Sky Air Palace Lord wasn't the personal disciple of the lifelong Realm Lord, or if Qin Wentian wasn't someone from the lifelong realm, the Sky Air Palace Lord would already be a dead man. As for the people of Azure Mystic, they were already used to this. When Qin Wentian unified the Azure Mystic Immortal Realms, many Empyreans died in his hands. In their eyes, it was extremely normal for Qin Wentian to defeat Empyreans at the same level as him. After all, they didn't understand what sort of character the Sky Air Palace Lord was. After they left, the Sky Air Palace Lord glanced at the three Palace Lords and spoke, "Everyone, don't tell Master about this matter for now. Princess Kitamura didn't travel together with us. She has already disobeyed Master's orders. When the time comes, we won't be able to absolve ourselves from the blame." The three Palace Lords silently cursed in their hearts. This fellow was trying to drag them down with him. He actually wanted to conceal this matter. However, they could understand his thoughts and nodded their heads with heavy expressions. The Xianyuan Palace Lord stared at Qin Wentian's vanishing silhouette as he silently mused. In the lifelong realm, other than the Realm Lord, most probably only that person from the desolate Heaven Palace would be able to suppress Qin Wentian. They truly didn't expect that the Lifeire Palace would have such a powerful Palace Lord rise up in such a short period of time. To them, this wasn't a good thing. Earlier, their relationship with Qin Wentian had already been strained. Most probably, it would be very difficult to mend the cracks between them. But luckily, there was the Sky Air Palace Lord watching over them. He was also the personal disciple of the Realm Lord, there was no need for them to care too much about him. The few of them then instructed their subordinates to keep this a secret. After that, they also moved forward, entering the depths of this forbidden ground to search for more secrets. If they could really obtain some good fortune in this ancient battlefield, they could toss everything to the back of their minds. Qin Wentian and the others continued on their way. Powerful spatial source energy gushed forth from him, enveloping everyone within it as they passed through spatial gates, traveling 1,000 miles in an instant. In his mind, the will of the ancient heavenly deity was guiding him in the right direction. "Senior, where are we going?" The spatial source energy around Qin Wentian brought everyone through another spatial gate, vanishing from their original location. At the same time, he asked the ancient heavenly deity. The central area of ancient Azure Mystic, the former floating city, the most flourishing place in the world. It's also the center of the ancient battlefield. If we want to search for good fortune, that place should be the most suitable. There would surely be divine depositories buried there. The ancient heavenly deity replied. "How long do we need?" Qin Wentian asked. "Your speed is too slow. This world has already transformed into a desolate land and there are no teleportation arrays here. If we rush like this, we might need 2 to 3 years." The ancient heavenly deity replied. Qin Wentian's heart trembled. Although he was mentally prepared, he was still badly shaken by a single sentence from the ancient heavenly deity. Now that he has stepped into the Empyrean realm and became the Heaven Empyrean of Azure Mystic, he was told that his speed was too slow, needing 2 to 3 years to reach a place. This was simply speechless, but when he thought about what sort of character the ancient heavenly deity was when he was alive, he could understand. A heavenly deity, how much stronger was he compared to an Empyrean? There was simply no way to compare them. It was like the difference between the sun in the sky and an ant on the ground. As for the time taken, it was also very normal. Ancient Azure Mystic was a place that could contend against the heavenly deities of the supreme ancient immortal realms. How vast was this place in the past? Qin Wendian only needed to imagine the current size of the lifelong realm and he would be able to understand. To him, the lifelong realm was already an extremely vast place. AI. Qin Wendian sighed in a depressed manner. Just traveling there required 2 to 3 years of time. He truly felt somewhat speechless. Why are you sighing? If there really is a divine depositories, even if others spend thousands or tens of thousands of years, they wouldn't feel that the time taken is long. Everyone in the world pursues the great Tao, and to those with a higher cultivation base, a single stroke of good fortune can save them 1,000,000 years of cultivation. 2 to 3 years is simply a drop of water in the ocean, it's insufficient to reach the apex. The ancient heavenly deity seemed to know what Qin Wendian was thinking as he calmly spoke. 1,000,000 years. Qin Wendian bitterly smiled and shook his head. Junior has only cultivated for a short period of time, I have no way to imagine how many years I would have to spend. Your talent can be considered the best among those I've met. You didn't grow up in those major powers of the heavenly deity race, but you still have to endure loneliness. Most probably, that person who imparted the undying scripture to you not only hoped that you would protect Azure Mystic, he also placed his hopes on you to revive Azure Mystic. Revive? Qin Wendian started. How many months and years would it take for a destroyed world to revive Azure Mystic? Since you have cultivated the undying scripture, as long as you don't die, the most scarce thing in this world is time. For an undying existence, as long as your talent is sufficient, you would be able to corroborate your Tao sooner or later. Could it be that you don't understand the meaning of undying? The ancient heavenly deity's voice was solemn. Undying means that one can conquer time and ascend to the divine altar. Qin Wendian started. He truly didn't think about the meaning of undying from this perspective. Was this why the undying scripture was so powerful? As long as I don't die, I would be able to ascend to the peak. Time would always be by my side. In this world, there has never been a lack of geniuses, including supreme characters. But who can say that they are undying? The vast majority of them all fell at different cultivation bases, turning into dust. They all had unparalleled talent, but ultimately, they were defeated by the enemy known as time. But for an undying person, they would never be defeated. The great Tao is the simplest, but the strongest Tao is the simplest logic. Chapter 1726. The ancient heaven deity wasn't wrong. The most precious and scarce thing in this world was time, but the thing it lacked the least was time as well. Time would never stop flowing. In the blink of an eye, it has already been 2 years since Qin Wendian entered ancient Azure Mystic for the second time. During these 2 years, many things happened in the outside world. This was especially so for the supreme ancient immortal realms. There were countless things happening every day. However, all of them were merely a drop in the ocean, unable to reach the apex. Only this time around, the commotion of ancient Azure Mystic's reappearance persisted for 2 years. Not only did it not subside, it actually grew increasingly intense. Because there were many powers that entered ancient Azure Mystic, news of this was transmitted to the upper world unceasingly. From the lower world, the supreme ancient immortal realms learned that not only did ancient Azure Mystic reappear, the remnant wills of a heavenly deity also appeared. One of the incomparably powerful heavenly deity races in the supreme ancient immortal realms, the winged god race, actually appeared in ancient Azure Mystic and possessed the body of a descendant of the winged god race. However, only the people of the Winged God clan knew that the genius who was possessed had already fallen. Yu Fifan was dead. This news was kept a secret, but they still sent even more experts to Azure Mystic. They had to bring the will of their ancestor back to the Winged God race. This was a death order, and they had to do it at all costs. That was their ancestor, a heavenly deity. Although he wasn't a living being and was only a strand of will, the memories he knew were extremely precious to the Winged God race. After the incident with the Winged God race, some of the major powers from the heavenly deity race who had once fought against ancient Azure Mystic all sent out their armies. This time around, it wasn't like the small skirmishes of those pathfinders, it was a true army of Empyreans. How powerful was the foundation of the ancient and powerful heavenly deity race? It was so long that it was impossible to calculate the amount of time they had existed. As long as they still existed, what scale would they grow to after so many years? Some of the deity race even had a population of hundreds of millions, encompassing boundless territories. These were just the people within their race, their blood-related clansmen, followers, and servants. Extremely strong characters were dispatched, personally escorting the experts of the clan across the celestial realms to the outskirts of Azure Mystic, sending them into Azure Mystic. Hence, Azure Mystic became extremely lively. The supreme ancient immortal realms was no longer a secret. Many people heard of this news and many places also claimed that they had seen experts from the upper world. Hence, some ambitious people in Azure Mystic were filled with boundless yearning towards the upper world. Qin Wentian naturally knew of the changes in the external world because Di Tian had always been guarding Heaven Empyrean City. The two of them were connected in their hearts and their insights could be shared as well. There was no need for both of them to enter ancient Azure Mystic. It would be better for one of them to protect ancient Azure Mystic in the dark. After all, his original self, Qin Wentian, brought away all the experts from Azure Mystic. There was no need for Di Tian to stay behind. Luckily, these people from the supreme ancient immortal realms had their sights set on ancient Azure Mystic. They basically had no interest in this weak Azure Mystic immortal realms. Although some unhappy things happened, they were all small-scale disturbances. This was something unavoidable. After the vast majority of people arrived, they immediately headed to the Forbidden Grounds. However today, 2 years later, Qin Wentian and his group were still rushing their way. Naturally, they weren't purely rushing their way, they would stop occasionally. For example, at this moment, in a desolate land, Qin Wentian stood on the peak of an ancient mountain and stared at a beautiful figure sitting cross-legged in front of him. This figure was none other than Princess Kitamura. Before her, there were many zombies moving about, guarding this area. These zombies had lifeless eyes but they would occasionally flash with a bright light, appearing extremely bizarre. Who? Drawing in a deep breath, Princess Kitamura stopped. Her beautiful eyes opened as she stared at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian's silhouette flashed as he appeared beside Princess Kitamura. He then asked in a light voice, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. However, the consumption of this tempering method is too great. Given the strength of my soul now, although I can freely control the zombies, it's extremely strenuous to make them listen to my commands. This is especially so for the Empyrean zombies. The burden on my soul is extremely great." Princess Kitamura spoke in a light voice. Qin Wentian nodded, he could understand. After all, Princess Kitamura was only at the peak stage of the immortal emperor realm. She, who cultivated the death scripture, could freely control zombies that had no self-consciousness. But if she wanted to control them to unleash their combat prowess, the burden on Princess Kitamura would be too great. Right now, she could only control a small number of Empyreans. Once there were too many Empyreans, the burden on her soul would increase exponentially and her soul wouldn't be able to endure it. Also, during the process of controlling the zombies, she mustn't be distracted. This meant that she wouldn't be able to fight freely. It was best for her to stay there quietly. To her main body, this was an extremely dangerous matter. However, it could also be resolved by controlling the zombies to protect her. At the very least, she wouldn't be seen through by others and wouldn't let others know that she was the one controlling the zombies. This was also the reason why Qin Wendian and Princess Kitamura were here alone. Even Princess Kitamura's father, the Dark North Immortal Emperor, didn't tell him the truth. This was related to the inheritance of the imperishable Heaven Lord of ancient Azure Mystic. He naturally had to keep it a secret. Once the slightest news leaked out, he and Princess Kitamura would become the targets of countless hegemonic powers in the supreme ancient immortal realms. In fact, even the heavenly deity race would be among them. If that was the case, they wouldn't even know how they died. Do your best to control the zombies and increase your proficiency in controlling them. By doing so, your resistance will grow stronger and stronger. Qin Wendian spoke. These weren't his words, they were the words the ancient heavenly deities will in his mind wanted to say. He was merely conveying the will of the ancient heavenly deity. Right. Bai Ming Huang nodded. Senior has already reminded me many times. Along the way, I've been controlling the zombies to accompany us. Qin Wendian laughed involuntarily. Let's return. Emicham, Bai Ming Huang nodded. Qin Wendian's spatial energy enveloped her and the two of them instantly left, regrouping with the others a moment later. The Dark North Immortal Emperor had a meaningful look on his face when he saw the two of them coming over. Sometimes, he was thinking about the relationship between the Heaven Emperor Qin Wendian and his daughter, Princess Kitamura, exactly. The two of them must have gone out alone quite a few times. Many people also smiled as they glanced at the Dark North Immortal Emperor. If Princess Kitamura was able to form a relationship with the Heaven Empyrean, the status of the Dark North Immortal Emperor would be no different from the Chongqing the Great. However, with both the Chongqing the Great and Qing Heir around, no one would be foolish enough to mention this. Qin Wendian didn't say anything. He walked to the side of Qing Heir and held her hand. The others might not know, but Qing Heir understood. He would often go out alone with Princess Kitamura in front of Qing Heir. If he hid this from Qing Heir, what would this mean? It would be too disrespectful to Qing Heir. There were no secrets between them. Qing Heir's expression didn't change at all. Her master had also hinted to her once before and she was somewhat speechless. If Qin Wendian really wanted to marry, she wouldn't say anything. In addition, she knew the reason and also knew that the two of them had experienced many things together in the supreme ancient immortal realms. The group of them continued on their journey, encountering many troubles along the way. Some of the zombies had extremely strong killing intents. Even if they were already dead, they wouldn't forget to kill when they saw people. However, Qin Wendian never tangled with them. Also, with the ancient heavenly deities Will and Bai Ming Huang around, there wasn't much delay. Finally, another half a year passed and they arrived at their destination, the Sky City. This was the center of ancient Azure Mystic, the most flourishing place. One could imagine how majestic the Sky City must have been in the past. But now, Qin Wendian and the others arrived below the city. They inclined their heads and stared upwards, only to see a vast expanse of desolation that stretched as far as the eyes could see. The Sky City, as the name implied, was a city that stood in the sky. This was a city that rose from flat ground and was tens of thousands of meters tall. At the entrance of the city, there was a flight of stairs that was tens of thousands of meters tall. Only by ascending the stairs would one be able to enter the city. From the broken and majestic stairway, one could imagine how majestic it must have been in ancient times. But even so, the flight of stairs was broken and the city gate collapsed. Everything was in ruins, desolation, and deathly silence. Under the dark sun, everything seemed to have withered away, causing everyone to truly feel the scene of the apocalypse. They ascended the city step by step and continued forward. From the dilapidated walls, they could faintly see the majesty of ancient times. The number of zombies in this city grew even more. All of them seemed to be filled with an incomparable longing for the place they protected when they were alive. Sadly, they were powerless to protect it. Qin Wendian saw an extremely powerful zombie hugging a tiny infant. He didn't move at all, as though he couldn't bear to put the infant down. When he was alive, he wasn't able to protect his child. He also saw an iron-towering giant wielding a terrifying divine weapon. He stood in front of a stretch of ruins, resembling a divinity. However, his eyes were empty and lifeless. The things he once protected were no longer there. These scenes impacted the hearts of everyone, causing them to involuntarily feel sorrow. This was war, cruel and cold-blooded. Also, this was a world-ending war. Those heavenly deities who came here to fight, what were the lives of the people in their eyes? At this moment, a figure sped over. This was a giant that was over 10,000 meters tall. However, he didn't have a head as it was chopped off by someone. It was extremely terrifying. He stared at everyone and it was unknown where his voice originated from. Where did you guys come from? He lifted a terrifying great axe in his hand. In an instant, a stifling pressure enveloped this entire space. If he cleaved down with his axe, it would be sufficient to destroy everything. I brought them here. A voice rang out from within Qin Wentian's body. Who are you? That giant's voice rang out once more. This body should be the body of Futian battle god when he was alive. I didn't expect that his head would be chopped off. Sir, are you the will of Futian battle god or the will of others? A shadow flew out from the center of Qin Wentian's brow, condensing into a human figure. Skybreak heavenly deity. The voice of the other party fluctuated. I didn't expect that your will would still exist and you were actually willing to leave this place. I am none other than Futian. Where did these people come from? The Skybreak heavenly deity actually abandoned this place and brought them here. Because, the prophecy of the Heaven Lord is about to be fulfilled. Hence, I'm here. The Skybreak heavenly deity spoke. The gigantic body of Futian battle god trembled. After that, a solemn voice that seemed to originate from the primordial era rang out, when the Undying returns, Azure Mystic will reappear, bringing chaos to the 33 heavens.